Uh, Good evening, friends. We welcome you to the VCM on recent changes in GST with effect from 1st of January 2022 that have got implemented. And before we start, I will just play our ICAI motto song. Just a second.
नहीं ढूंढना चालू
य एष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति य एष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामंशो पुरुषो निर्विमाणः निर्विमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तदेव शुक्रब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वतनुनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्द्वैत 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 एतद्द्वैत.
Thank you. Someone is on mute. So I'm muting. Yes. Thank you so much. So today we have got two learned speakers on our platform. We'll start with CA Gaurav Gupta ji. He is presently practicing as an advocate, and I'll just share his profile. Yes, advocate CA Gaurav Gupta ji is a graduate from Shri Ram College of Commerce, Delhi University, and a law graduate from Delhi University. He is a fellow member of our institute. He has also completed his master's in law and has also obtained doctorate in taxation from University of France. He is practicing as an advocate in Delhi High Court and many tax tribunals. Sir, with your permission, I am skipping some part of your profile. Sir is practicing as an advocate in high courts, and now we see regularly that sir is practicing in various tribunals, maybe even Supreme Court. Sir can brief us on that. Sir is a author of many books, and we have been seeing that sir is a regular contributor to many articles, and his posts are regularly coming on various websites. He is also a co-opted member of the Strategy, Perspective, Planning and Monitoring Committee of ICAI for the financial year 21-22. He has also been an elected member of various bar associations, and also he has been on the Indirect Tax Committee of our institute for many years. Sir has addressed more than 600 seminars on indirect taxation in various forums. Before I hand it over to our learned speaker for today, I will just mention some important changes that have happened from 1st of January 2022, because we all know that there were some changes that were done in the Finance Act of the last year, but they got notified only late in 2021, which were made effective from 1st of January. So some of the important changes that I am just highlighting for the benefit of our participants, and also we will request our learned speaker to cover some of these changes, time permitting, in little detailed manner. The first important change that we see is that now GST on services supplied by restaurants is now being collected through e-commerce operators. So we may not feel the impact of it because the cost has not increased, but the procedural part has increased. whereas the e-commerce operator is now supposed to pay the taxes, collect and pay the taxes, and not the restaurant. Second is very important is that Aadhaar authentication is now compulsory for filing of refund and revocation of cancelled registration applications. Another very important that we all have seen is that now the input tax credit is restricted of to only which is appearing in GSTR 2B. So there was earlier a confusion that should we go with 2A or 2B, but now it has been made clear that it is only that what is appearing in your 2B is something that you can avail in your 3B. So this is also a very important change. Some changes have also come in the penalty provisions of e-way bill, wherein the tax and penalty of 100% each has now been replaced with 200% penalty. The self-assessment procedure has also a little changed, wherein whatever is disclosed or uploaded in GSTR 1, and if the same is not paid in GSTR 3B, then it becomes a self-assessed tax, and the government can issue a notice for recovery of the same. There are some changes in provisional attachment also, some information systems wherein government can ask for information from any person. So these are some important changes that have happened from 1st of January 2022, which we would request our learned speaker to kindly cover in his deliberations. So now with these a few words, we will first have CA advocate Dr. Gaurav Gupta ji as our first participant, as our first learned speaker, and then secondly, after almost 1.5 hours, we will have our second speaker, CA Abhay Desai ji, who will join us almost, I think, at around 6:20-25, and he will take the second session. Sir, would you like to take questions in between your deliberation, or would you want to take it after you complete your deliberation?
Tarunji, since it's a close gathering of a study circle, we can take the questions within the session also. We
Okay,
need
sir.
not wait because the topics are such that the members may want to discuss a particular point during the deliberation itself.
Okay, so I will moderate the session, and I will request the participants that if they have any specific question, they can either raise their hand so I can unmute them, or they can post the question in the chat box. So both me and sir, both of us can see, and if sir wants, he can reply to the question. So with these few words, I will now hand it over to our learned speaker. Sir, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarunji. Very good evening to all the members of ACEA Study Circle. It is always a pleasure and honor. I'm looking into the continuing wave of COVID. I would say it is not my, I'm feeling a bit unfortunate on the fact that I'm not with you in person, because the kind of deliberation discussions I have enjoyed in this forum in the past is, it's a memory to cherish for me. I hope today's deliberation, everyone will be joining, being a part. And yes, the topic for today, the recent amendments and changes which have been brought in from 1st of January 2022. My dear friends, changes in GST has been an ongoing aspect, I would say. It's an ongoing thing since the inception of GST in 2017. We have seen number of changes, number of notifications, circulars, amendments in those notification, clarification on those notifications, those clarifications being amended, withdrawn over the past 4 years of GST now. However, any new tax, it will take its own time and journey to settle down. And with the size, with the complications, with what we have seen in GST, I think this act will need another 3 or 4 years more to settle down in its first phase itself. The first audits, the first scrutinies of the returns have started. A lot of questions have started coming from the department. And I think most of us have grown beyond the basic questions of GST 1 and 3B. It is also indeed a pleasure that I'm accompanied by right now 2 learned faculties themselves, Shubham Bhai, Tarunji. And I think they will also add up to the entire discussion whenever and wherever they feel. So the first, I think the topic has been so divided that I'm given 3 topics by Shubham ji. One is the concept of mutuality, which has been I would say, tried to be reintroduced. So I'm underlining the word tried to be reintroduced in the GST statute, believing that this particular amendment would definitely bring the mutuality thing into the ambit of GST, and the government would be able to tax this particular amendment after this amendment. However, what will be the implication? What exactly is the amendment? How is it different from the prior to amendment era? All these questions we will look into it. What will be the impact? Will this judgment of Honorable Supreme Court in the case of State of West Bengal versus Calcutta Club, will it still hold good, or will there be any deviations from that particular judgment? We will all look into these particular aspects. Second topic which I'll be taking is about the recovery, the amendment which has been made in section 75 subsection 12 by way of an explanation, whether that particular amendment holds a direct recovery from the assessee. I think the government itself has gone a bit light, or I would say subdued, by the very introduction of the instruction number 01/2022 GST. Still, there are certain gaps in our understanding and the instructions which have been passed on by the government to the officer. What are the gaps? What are still the lacunas? We will look into it. And one very important amendment, which just Tarunji has mentioned, which has been brought in section 151, where earlier the commissioner was supposed, or which was having the power to call statistics, that has been replaced by any kind of information which can be called now by the commissioner in respect of any ongoing inquiry. So I'll start with my first topic, which is the introduction of section 7(1)AA in the scope of supply. So what has happened is, just let me give you a brief background on a very quick note first. In the decision of State of West Bengal versus Calcutta Club Limited, Honorable Supreme Court had struck down the levy, the intent of levy, I would say, by the government on the services provided by the members or the clubs inter se. And also, even after the introduction of Article 366(29)A, the VAT also on the transactions inter se between the members and the clubs was struck down. Now, the Honorable Supreme Court had said very, very simply, the doctrine of mutuality is applicable to incorporated and unincorporated members club even after 46th amendment, adding Article 366(29)A to the Constitution, and thus sale tax could have been levied on such supply of food or drinks to permanent members. So from the permanent member, it cannot be recovered. However, if it is with the third parties who are not the members or non-members, definitely the transaction is not that of mutuality, and therefore it can be recovered from such particular persons. I'm very, very carefully using the word members and persons. So when we are talking about members, we are talking about the concept of mutuality. If someone is not a member, the concept of mutuality will not prevail. Similarly, from 2005 onwards, even if the definition, there is a deeming fiction brought in the Service Tax Act, it does not purport to levy service tax on the members club in an incorporated form or incorporated form. Now, that was a wider decision which came from Honorable Supreme Court. We were hoping to see a decision only in respect of unincorporated clubs, but we were happy to see that the concept of mutuality was upheld both for the unincorporated and incorporated club by the Honorable Supreme Court. Now, what were the fine lines of the decision? I'll just come to, because I need to discuss the concept of mutuality also. Before that, the government thought that now in GST, we have not brought in even the amendments which were brought in VAT and service tax. The amendments, the changes or the deeming fictions which we had brought in the earlier era, we have not brought into the current piece of legislature. So will the current legislature, is it competent to levy tax on transactions inter se between the members and the clubs? So out of that particular thought process, there was one amendment which was brought in in the definition of supply. Section 7, effective from 1st of January 2022, but having a retrospective effect from July 1, 2017. Now, what is that particular amendment? A clause AA has been added in subsection 1 of section 7, which says the expression supply will include AA, the activities or transaction by a person other than an individual to its member or constituents or vice versa. Now, please look into the wordings very, very carefully. Activities or transaction by a person other than individual to its members or constituents or vice versa. So from members to club, club to members. For cash, deferred payment, or other valuable consideration. I'll take a pause here because these three lines, let us first try to absorb them. So what are the introduction all about? It is about any person other than an individual, number one. Number two, the transaction should be between that particular person and its members or constituents or vice versa. So we can be a club, we can be a society, any body which is formed and whose existence is only based on its members, any transaction between two of them, that is being covered within the ambit of this particular amendment. Number three, transaction or activities between them. So if there is only anything which is not falling within the ambit of activity or transaction, which is actually very, very wide word. Now, what is an activity? What is a transaction? Transaction is more to do with the business concept. Activities are much, much wider than transaction. So here, the government has tried to cover both activities and transaction within the ambit of this particular amendment. So activity, transaction between member and clubs or constituents or vice versa. Now comes a very, very important part of the amendment. For the activity should be for cash, deferred payment, or other valuable consideration. Now, here is where the entire concept, in my humble opinion, collapses. If we are making a body, and we are making a body with within the concept of mutuality. So what we did, let me take a very simple example. I'm taking very, very simple an example. Me, Tarunji and Shubhamji. Hum tino ikhatte hue, and three of us, we said, okay, let us contribute 1 lakh each. And we will give it to one person who will supply the ration for the next 1 year to our home. So I'm taking a very, very simple example. So in this particular case, what we have done, three of us have contributed to a pool. We will give this money to a third gentleman, and that third gentleman will supply the ration or the food items for next 1 year, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, to our homes. Now, in this particular case, is there a transaction where we are earning out of it or where there is a commitment? No, sir. This has been pooled in. There has been a contribution, and that particular contribution pooled together will be given to a third person who will be giving the benefit to three of us. So this is the concept of mutuality. Now, when we are talking about three people, it looks very, very easy. But when the concept will be enlarged to 500 people, then there are complications because there will be no privity of understanding. While there is a privity of contract, but there will not be a privity of understanding between one single member and all the other members. So in those particular situations, what we think that there is a body which has come up. There is a body which is different from the members. And therefore, there is no concept of mutuality. No, my dear friend. Whether it is 3 people or 300 people or 30,000 people, concept of mutuality will remain same. What are the basic ingredients of concept of mutuality? See, there is no defined formula for concept of mutuality. You will have to look into on a case-to-case basis. However, when we speak about mutuality, the term is not new. The term has been since ages. The very concept that no man can trade with himself. He cannot make, in what it is true sense or meaning, taxable profit by dealing with himself. You cannot trade with yourself. That is the intent of mutuality. Now, this is long as back in the case of PAL CB in Dublin Corporation versus M. Adam, it was held. The concept was put to challenge time and again. I cannot earn out of myself. That is concept of mutuality. My 5 branches, I'm now extending this argument to another stream. My branches, can they earn profit out of myself? I've seen people who have also undertaken transactions of job work in GST between branches under section 143. Very good, sir. How can you have a transaction of job work with yourself? The term used is not a distinct person. There has to be a concept where goods belonging to another person should go to the other person. When the goods are moving from one branch to another branch, it is the other branch good also. So it is not the branch's goods coming to branch B. It is branch B's property also. So job work cannot happen between 2 branches. That is my humble opinion on the subject. Similarly, in the concept of mutuality, one has to understand that what am I putting into that society, into that club, into that body is not consideration. I am under no obligation. I am under no contract to put that money if it is a concept of mutuality. For the very simple reason, it is my body. My contribution will go, there will be a common procurement into that particular body. And I am not looking at earning profit from myself. So for example, I'm taking again the simple example of 3 of us. So Shubhamji, myself and Tarunji. What we said, sir, we will put 1 lakh each. And then Tarunji and Shubhamji, they went and they spoke to one of the shopkeepers and he said, sir, I will take 2,70,000 for supply of all the pulses or whatever for next 3 months to home of 3 of you. Now in this particular case, my dear friend, they have spent how much? Out of 3 lakh, they spent 2,70,000. And they came back happily. Gaurav, we saved 30,000. Now on that 30,000, should we pay income tax also? Or you want that on that 3 lakh, we should first pay GST at the rate of 18%. And then if the profits still remain, we should divide and pay income tax also on that. If you are saying no, then my dear friend, the concept of mutuality, you just have to multiply the number. The concept remains same. There can also be a change in the facts. What can be the change? As we can have different consumptions also, and therefore we have to make different contribution. So I would say, no, I have 8 members in my family. Shubhamji say I have 6 members. Tarunji say I have 4 members, whatever number. Accordingly, we have contributed. So Tarunji contributed 80,000. I contributed 1,20,000 and Shubhamji contributed 1 lakh. So this variance of contribution will also not take away the concept of mutuality. If the entire concept is that we have to pool in the money to derive the benefit or derive something from a common pool, and we are not looking towards earning a profit, we are not there to do any business. So in the course or furtherance of business also fails in the concept of mutuality. So my dear friend, in order to overcome, the government has come out with this particular amendment. However, again, the word which has been used by the government is not contribution. It is saying any activity or transaction for cash, deferred payment, or consideration, any other consideration. So if the transaction is for a consideration and not a contribution, then it will fall within the ambit of this particular amendment. Otherwise, it will not fall within the ambit of this particular amendment. I hope I'm very, very clear the difference between the word contribution and consideration. What is consideration? We all know it has also been defined. It is a payment which I am under an obligation to pay to the supplier. It is not my contribution to supplier's shop. There will be new variants which will be coming up, like I'm forbidding this word COVID. GST में activities के भी variants कई निकलेंगे. But not every variant is a supply. Very recently, I again had spoken on length on a very fine topic, I would say. Not every transaction in a business is a supply, and not every income which you earn in the business is exigible to GST. Vice versa, not on every supply you may make a profit or you may earn an income. So income tax and GST, they are two different concepts. Their levy is altogether on two different aspects of the transactions undertaken in the business. We have to be very careful. You might earn a profit, but not every time you may earn, provide a supply. So for example, very recently there has been a transaction wherein a gentleman who was again an e-commerce company, it has provided, let us say, 1 lakh rupee to every shop with which it was associated to make or to sustain that particular shop during COVID. So Tarunji is the e-commerce company. I am the shop owner. Tarunji, usually I used to trade on that Tarunji's portal. During the COVID period, Tarunji said, I understand, Gaurav, there are many things which becomes unsustainable during this tenure. So I am giving you 1 lakh rupees for April to June 2020 so that your business survives. Now, in this particular case, while there is an income to me, while there is a, I would say, unforeseen gain. Why gain? Because I have to bear the cost. But now, since Tarunji has come up with this particular amount to me, my costs are mitigated. That gain does not purport to a supply. It is not a supply under GST. Any contribution, any windfall gain, any income, you have to test independently in GST. हम क्या करते हैं? What we do is, okay, so we have earned an income, we have to pay 18%. Why? The officer will tomorrow raise a question. Sir, they are there to raise the eyebrow. It is their work. How can you expect a government officer to come to you and say, okay, we are very happy what you have done, so let us reward you? No. Paying taxes is not something which is for which someone has to be awarded. It is your duty. It's your national duty. And they are coming there to ensure that you have paid your taxes properly. There will every time be a new learning for the professional also, for the business also. Take it in the right spirit. It is not that if you have been told to pay a tax, that is something which is a black spot on your business or on your reputation. No, sir. It's a part and parcel of the business. If a teacher is checking the notebook of any child, definitely there will be some mistakes which will be pointed out, and it will be for the betterment of the child in future. But yes, the teacher, now comes the question which Tarunji has raised. The teachers should also be aware of the subject. That is the only problem. So we are hoping that yes, with the afflux of time, we will find more matured auditing, more matured scrutinies, and frivolous issues will not be taken up by the department. Moving forward, sir. Now, having discussed the contribution and consideration, what are we looking at? What are the kind of transactions which we are looking at? But before that, the very important question comes up. Sir, this amendment is retrospective from 1st of July 2017. Should I collect the taxes for the period from 1st of July 2017 till 1st of January 2022 from my members and pay to the government? My dear sir, my humble answer is, this tax again is a retrospective act of the government. It is not a clarificatory act of the government. Please see, the amendment is not a clarification. The amendment is not something where there is an explanation which is added within 1 year, which is the rightful period. But this is a substantial amendment. It cannot be retrospective, in my humble opinion. Now that particular retrospectiveness will go into challenge. But however, let us say it was a small body and the tax amount which can be collected and paid to the government is very, very minuscule. 4 lakhs, 5 lakhs. Pay it, sir. Don't get into litigation. Try to avoid litigations to the extent possible. Litigation should be the last resort because it will consume a lot of energy, resources from you and your members. Number two, if you're sitting on some substantial amounts which you think you will not be able to recover see, what is the difference between direct and indirect taxes? A very famous case, whenever we discuss about indirect tax, I usually quote the Connaught restaurant decision. McDonald's. What was the question? The softie. There were two products which made McDonald's a big hit in India. One was the softie, the other was the Mac burger, the aloo tikki burger. Now, the softie, whether it is an ice cream or a food item, that was the question long back. Now, what is the difference between a direct tax and indirect tax? Direct tax, even if it comes after 10 years, it was a tax which was supposed to be paid by you. And today also, and 10 years back also. Indirect tax is not a tax which is supposed to be paid by you today. But after 4 years, if the demand is fructified, the entire burden will be borne by the supplier. So when you are taking decision in indirect taxes, you have to be very, very cautious. You also have to be cautious of the very fact. Sir, I am your client. I came to you. Sir, my product seems to be falling within the ambit of 12% also, 18% also. Which rate should I apply? Most of the practitioners, if they are not able to clarify the cloud, or they will not be able to tell the exact rate, what will they say? Gaurav, out of abundant caution and conservative approach, let's pay 18%. Sir, if your product is taxable at 12%, and if your council or yourself has decided that it should be paid at 18%, what is the harm? Sir, the biggest damage is if it is a 12% item, any amount which you pay out of ITC, mark my words, will be recoverable from you in cash. Very clearly, ITC can only be used for the payment of output tax. The way output tax has been defined in Section 2 of the CGST Act, output tax means tax chargeable. It is not tax charged, unlike the definition of input tax. Input tax uses the word charged. Output tax uses the word chargeable. So anything which you are taking from the customer, which is beyond the amount chargeable under the Act, that is not your output tax. That cannot be paid using the ITC. So be very, very careful. You overpayment of taxes in GST is also harmful. I know the kind of topic which I have just dealt with. सबके मन में सवाल आता है कि सर फिर कहाँ जाए? ज़्यादा पे कर दिया तो भी GST में मार पड़ रही है, कम पे करेंगे तो भी पड़ रही. That is how, my dear friend, the entire act is. So be very, very careful. किसी का 5 और 18 के बीच में अगर decision हो, if you have to choose between 5% and 18%, you cannot get away from a situation by saying, okay, I think on a conservative basis, your customers will get ITC, you pay 18%. So they will get ITC. Their ITC cannot be challenged because the term which has been used is charged in input tax. But in output tax, you will have to make sure if the rate which comes out tomorrow at 5%, the differential 13% will be recovered. If it is paid from ITC, it will be recovered in cash from you. Will ITC be restored? Again, sir, we are talking about a round of litigation. I don't know what will be the answer to that. Maybe the court will say, yes, on a equitable basis, it should be restored. And maybe we can find the honorable court to tell me, ki Gaurav, the time has to be done within the time frame of limitation given under 54. And therefore, the time has gone. I don't know. Litigation is something where there cannot be a sure-shot answer unless to some extent the laws have settled. And we have seen these surprises. Honorable Delhi High Court, Bharti Airtel, GST 2 was not introduced. The company had a very, very, I would say, strong position because it has already won the case in Honorable Delhi High Court, whereby the refund was demanded by the company. However, Honorable Supreme Court said, no, The entire assessment of tax was your responsibility. It was based on your records. And very interestingly, 2A was merely a facilitator. So Honorable Supreme Court has put 2A into a position of merely a facilitator. Unlike our learned officers who have put in 2A as the only mechanism, if it is not appearing in 2A, you will not get the credit. So they should be reminded, my dear sir, Honorable Supreme Court has put 2A only as a facilitator. Even though we have lost the battle in Bharti Airtel, but the very point that 2A is not the form deciding the credit is the substance, is the decision of Honorable Supreme Court. So look into these aspects also. Coming back, sir.
गौरव जी, ये जो पॉइंट आपने बोला अभी आउटपुट टैक्स वाला, एक्सेस में पेमेंट अगर करने से आईटीसी का प्रॉब्लम जो है, कोई केस लॉ आया है कि इस पे अभी तक?
सर अभी तक तो ये फ्रेटर्निटी में अगर आप देखेंगे तरुण जी, आई थिंक वेरी फ्यू स्पीकर्स आर टेकिंग अप दिस पॉइंट. शुभम भाई कैन
वही हम बोल रहे हैं कि पहली बार हमने किसी स्पीकर से ये पॉइंट सुना, इसीलिए थोड़ा माइंड में ये क्वेश्चन आया.
And I am also very, very sensitive that I am only speaking between CS. I'm not putting this point before the authorities.
Right.
Otherwise, you will find the case very soon coming up across India.
Right.
Sanitizer, if you remember, many of the people, they have paid on sanitizer at the higher rate or lower rate. I'm not going into that argument. But if it is decided at a lower rate, you will find a lot of demand coming on to these kind of people. Abhi to department is also, of the view that if higher taxes are paid, no problem. Sir, there is problem everywhere in GST.
Right. मतलब अभी हायर टैक्सेस जनरली यही है कि हायर टैक्सेस पेमेंट अगर हो रहा है तो ठीक है, मतलब बचे हुए हैं, कोई डिमांड नहीं आएगी. अबंडेंट क्वेश्चन के हिसाब से जो आपने बोला.
आउटपुट डेफिनेशन आप देख लीजिएगा, सेक्शन 2, आई थिंक क्लॉज 89. You will find the right answer that the word chargeable and the word charged, these two words will create a mess in the life of the businessman tomorrow.
ये सब पॉइंट आपके दिमाग में आ रहे हैं जब से आप एडवोकेट बन गए. जब तक आप सीए की प्रैक्टिस करते थे ये सब नहीं आते थे आपके. नहीं.
And see, there are things which we have taken up, a lot of causes have come up before everyone. Yesterday, Honorable Delhi High Court, in one of the matters, it has issued the notice whereby we have challenged Rule 90, Sub-Rule 3. The officer can issue a deficiency memo every time when the refund application has a deficiency. Now the rule says that the applicant has to file a fresh application. Now, my dear sir, the limitation is also seen from that fresh application, not from the original application. So rejection of the original application by issuance of a deficiency memo without giving the opportunity of being heard is actually dividing the assessee of the very basic principle of natural justice or the alterum partem. The assessee has to be heard before you reject his original application. Without hearing, by way of, so the deficiency memo has become a bypass of rejection. So we have challenged that and notice has been issued. Let's see. There are a lot of things. Tarunji, don't think that there is only after advocate ये सोच रहे हैं वो सोच रहे हैं. अब तो जो सामने आ रहा है वो सोच रहे हैं. चलिए sir, moving forward.
Sir, please let me know if this question is a little too early, but I had a question with regard to contribution versus consideration का जो question आ रहा था. So I'll just give you a very small case. Please let me know if you want to discuss after a point of time. So in Calcutta, there's a Newtown Development Authority. So there are a lot of cooperative societies which are there. What is cooperative society? So basically, let's say land has been given and awarded to a group of people, which is forming a cooperative society. That group of that cooperative society is now owning the land, which has been given by the government authorities. Now everyone is making contribution in that society, and thereafter that building is being constructed from that. Now it is a very similar example to what you had given for that atta thing, where ration thing, where you had said that ration would be provided. So let's say there are 8 members providing contribution to a society, and thereafter that society is building a flat using that contribution from the members, and at the end of CC, the flats would be allotted by the society to the members. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is very similar to that example which you are given, that it would be taxable. So
no, it will not be taxable.
okay.
When it is a contribution by the members for the flats to be constructed by the cooperative society.
Correct.
So there is no privity of construction between the society and the member. Why am I saying so? Because tomorrow you cannot sue yourself. हम तीनों बैठे हैं, ठीक है जी, and we all three tomorrow have some difference. We cannot sue ourselves. We can't go to court and challenge ourselves. Okay, we are making wrong decisions. Please punish. So similarly, those members who have come together, who have contributed for the construction, there can be a case of siphoning of funds, fraud. But there cannot be a contractual arrangement between oneself. You can challenge the body which has been made and which has been entrusted with the funds. It has done a case of fraud. It has siphoned off the money to causes other than for which it was collected. That is a case of fraud. But it cannot be a case of contract act, whereby you can ask for a specific performance, because ultimately that particular cooperative society is nothing but you. You are demanding a specific performance from yourself. If all the members come together and they say, sir, this cooperative society is not making the flats. We want you to pass, maybe a writ or any other order which you feel good. So the honorable court may pass such an order that this particular body should make the flat. Arey sir, who is this body? It is you all members. You all members are wanting to get an instruction to yourself. Are you getting me?
Right, sir.
So you tomorrow, if all the members decide, you can choose a new elected body who will take care, but then the body is you.
Right, sir.
So this very final point one has to understand. I cannot have a privity with myself. And when I'm saying so, there is again, I am not very handy with that particular decision, but Gujarat tribunal sometime back, Ahmedabad tribunal, it has come out with this particular decision on the very same facts which you said. Those were the days of service tax, but the concept has not changed. That is what I'm saying. If anyone thinks that with the introduction of this particular double A, anything has changed, in my humble opinion, Shubham bhai, nothing has changed. Rather, government has made its case weaker, because the word which has been used is consideration, not contribution. So all contributions will go outside. If tomorrow a society decides, okay, we all contribute 15,000 each for the renovation of lift, not taxable. It's a contribution, not a consideration. And very, very importantly, I cannot have a contract with myself. Where will I go to effect the specific performance on that particular contract? It will be always with the third party जिसको वो contract दिया गया. Maybe Otis, Schindler, Cone Elevator, any of the elevator companies.
Right, sir. So would the answer change in like two situations? First situation, that the building is also owned by the cooperative society at the end in the registrar, or the flats are thereafter transferred in the name of the flat owners? I mean, would the answer be different in both the cases? Because in first case, ideally, I am contributing and the cooperative society is thereafter buying. It's very clear that over there, this is like a contribution which I am making, and thereafter the society is having something built in its own name, which is fine. So what if I am contributing something that is resulting in a property coming in my name thereafter?
See, Shubhamji, the moment we are able to divide the existence of the body from the members, then we are not talking about a body which is of the members. Then it is a body which is having its own perpetual succession, even devoid of the members. So for example, a partnership firm. Can the firm be there if all the members of the partnership, all the partners, sorry, they are traveling in an airplane and they die? So is the case with the society. If all the members of the society die, will the society exist? It cannot. The body which is formed out of the members and is dependent on the existence of the members. It can be, yes, after me, my share will go to my son.
Yeah, that's of course there.
Those are different things. But still, you are replacing the member. Think about a situation when there are no members. Will the body exist? It cannot. It cannot. So we have to first look into situations where the members and the body are of the term. So Young Men India decision we have to see. We have to see Sports Club of Gujarat. We have to see all these decisions to first understand that the body where the members and the body are one, the concept of mutuality exists. The moment they are devoid, they are two different bodies. For example, a private limited company, which is an incorporated body under an act which is separate from the promoters. That is the status which it has enjoyed. Then we are talking about a body where every transaction between two of it. I'm very, very surprised that when we talk about mutuality, we are a bit inclined to put tax. Now I'm giving a very simple example. I am a private limited company with two directors and it's a very well-off company. It's one of your clients. Tarun bhai, listen it very carefully, because now you will say, ki Gaurav, after Advocate Gaurav, you are again talking something against the SSC. No. I'm not doing that. But your client is a very well-to-do client. It's a private limited company. It has 4 vehicles, 4 Mercedes in that company. And you are adding, मेरे को income tax का थोड़ा सा मैं गलत भी बोल दूं तो थोड़ा सा I'll take forbearance of everyone on that. Income tax में there is a addition which is made in the salary of the directors for car use, perquisite, right? Which is what? Meager 1500, 1800, 2400 per month. Now, when you are making that addition, what you are admitting? That the car has been used both for private and official use. Now that vehicle belongs to whom? Company. There is an admission by the company also, by the directors also, that it is being used for the private purpose of the directors. Have you taken care of Schedule 1 of the GST statute? Assets put to use without consideration. बताइए सर, कल को अगर वो 16B का परक्विजिट उठा लेंगे ऑफिसर, तो what answer will we will give? Tell all the directors, sir, मर्सिडीज कंपनी में चलाओ, एक ऑल्टो जरूर रख लो अपने पास पर्सनल यूज के लिए, परक्विजिट जोड़ना बंद करो. Am I very clear? And if you are putting it to private use, beware that Schedule 1 is sitting watching you. Tomorrow, without consideration, you will be into problem. Now,
इसमें तो it is forming a part of the salary of the director. तो कंपनी के लिए तो खर्चा ही हो गया ना
सर. कंपनी के लिए खर्चा हो गया,
कंपनी का तो पर्सनल यूज नहीं हुआ ना.
आपका एडमिशन हो गया कि कंपनी की प्रॉपर्टी पर्सनल यूज के लिए डायरेक्टर यूज कर रहा है.
डायरेक्टर यूज कर रहा है, ठीक है, लेकिन कंपनी के लिए तो मान लीजिए वो जो भी परक्विजिट है वो तो खर्चा में चला गया, वो तो उसके सैलरी में ऐड हो गया जो कि आउट ऑफ जीएसटी है. तो मतलब ये जो है एक नया पॉइंट है, मतलब सोचना पड़ेगा इसमें.
आराम से शुभम भाई तैयार बैठे हैं समझाने के लिए. ठीक है. This is again something which we have to look very, very carefully. Now I'll give you the flip side of it. Is Schedule 1 transactions taxable? In my humble opinion, no. Why am I saying so? Again, this is one view which I've been holding for quite a long time. Till there is a credit which is available, I usually don't suggest going into litigation. Yes, if there is a substantial amount involved which is going as tax but not available as credit, in that case, my dear friend, the question which comes up is the definition of supply is not provided in the Constitution. And by the very virtue of the definition of supply in the Act, is government being granted unfettered powers to put anything and everything into supply? So tomorrow, if they put that Tarunji, if he is thinking something good for his son, and if that thinking is something which is very, very valuable, that will be deemed to be a supply because his son is a major son now. Can that kind of a transaction be allowed? Why not? If supply is such unfettered powers within the definition which is incorporated in the Act and government can put anything into it, Why can that not be? Or for that matter, the transactions in terms of what we do for our livelihood, for the family, they will be added as deemed supply. Is it possible? The apparent answer seems to be no. But the question is, why no? The answer lies into the very fact that supply has not been defined in the Constitution. So when the Constitution was amended, what was thought? What was the thought of the framers? The legislature was of the view that the natural meaning of supply is what we wanting to tax. What is the natural meaning of supply? It is the supply when there are two people, two persons. You cannot tax a supply with oneself. However, we see in Schedule 1 that because of the powers given under Section 7, Schedule 1 transactions have been brought into the purview of taxability. Sir, in my humble opinion, that is not the intent. We are traveling back to the days of 1958 Gannon-Drunkley, when works contract was challenged. Is it included in sale? The answer was no. You cannot deem anything by virtue of an act which is not there in the Constitution within your power to levy tax on. But still, I would say somebody has to stand up and challenge. I'm giving some thoughts. I'm just looking forward to when this is being tested, when it will be put to test before the honorable courts, whether Schedule 1 transactions are taxable transactions, or has the government, it has extended, it has gone beyond the powers conferred under the constitutional 246A to the government, and now they have just started deeming supply. Is deemed supply a part of supply, the power conferred under the Constitution? That is the very basic question which we are still waiting to be seen, examined by the courts. Now, sir, it is already 6. I'm left with another 20 minutes. I think concept of mutuality, do we have any questions, or can I move forward?
I think Gaurav ji can move ahead क्योंकि अभी
ठीक है,
chat box में कोई questions नहीं है. कुछ आएगा तो
If everyone wants to take some note of the decisions which have happened in past, I think State of West Bengal versus Calcutta Club, that's the most recent 2019 decision, very celebrated decision. Then you have one more very I would say the landmark decision, Supreme Court in the case of Young Men's India Association Madras and others. Again, Camp Sport Club versus CIT Delhi, Dalhousie Institute, Saturday Club Limited, Sports Club of Gujarat, Ranchi Club decision, and number of decisions you will find on concept of mutuality. You should look into before you put any transaction. Just because there looks to be two bodies, we have to effectively see whether what is the constituent of that particular body, what is the money coming for and from, and to be applied for what. Then only we should try to answer all of these particular kind of questions. Then there are certain contributions which you make. I'll give you certain example. There is a person who is contributing to a hospital for the operation theater. And then this gentleman, the hospital will put the name of that gentleman. Contrary, this operation theater is made by the contribution of Mr. So-and-so. Will it lead to a taxable transaction because the gentleman has paid the money for the construction of a charitable, a part of the charitable hospital? Answer is no. My dear sir, that particular person out of his own benevolence has contributed something, and there is no specified recipient of the output. So when it is for a public cause, no defined recipient, again, there cannot be a taxability. There can be.
Gaurav ji, I agree with you on this point कि taxation supply का part नहीं होना चाहिए. But I remember एक advance ruling अभी recently आया था where it has said something opposite to what we are just discussing.
Why do you think the advance ruling will ever speak in favor of the assessee? You know the constituent of that particular body.
Correct.
So I am not saying that they are wrong. They are duty bound. Let's accept it. अगर कोई कहता है कि तरुण जी, you are appearing for a client, and you are only telling me that these items are not taxable. So Tarunji will have a very simple answer. Sir, I'm duty bound. I'm here to represent my SSC. I'm here to put up a case. I'm not here to go for an arbitration or offer the amounts for taxation. Please.
लेकिन एडवांस रूलिंग में तो ऑफिसर्स ड्यूटी बाउंड नहीं है ना टू, मतलब एडवांस रूलिंग इज sort of
it is
it's
a
an independent
quasi-judicial body. It is a quasi-judicial body,
right,
as quasi-judicial as an adjudicating officer,
correct,
who is not even the appellate officer, who
right,
is a part of the, who is a outcome of the statute. Do you think
right,
he is not pro revenue? He is pro
they are,
revenue.
yes, yes,
It is not a judicial body.
right.
Why we
लेकिन
say
अभी
quasi-judicial? Because they are duty bound to follow the procedures where the natural principles of natural justice are not, divided on part of the appellant or the applicant. But they are not judicial body who will give you a very fair view on that.
no.
They will give you the departmental view on that. It is not something new. In that we had something what we call, I'm forgetting that application name. So where you go and you get determination. You get so what they are giving you is the departmental view. See, from our perspective, whether it is taxable or not. It is not a judicial view. So you should look at AR, but what always I request is, number one, it is, why is it only made applicable? Why is not a tribunal decision made applicable to the person who is into appeal and his jurisdictional officer? Why this body has been made applicable only to 2 people? Sir, very simple. That's a judicial body. Courts ko to main chhod, matlab courts, they are beyond. They are not below, but even tribunals are a creature of legislature. Usi act mein se nikalta hai tribunal. Still, it is a judicial body. And to retain its judicial character, they always say there should be a majority of the judicial member over and above the number of technical members. Right, sir? So these are very sensitive areas. ARs आप पढ़ें, मैं ये नहीं कहता कि वो नहीं, because this will, what is the benefit of AR? AR are basically preponing the disputes which I would have 5 years ahead. मैं आज एक transaction करूंगा, 3 साल तक वो करता हूं, then the officer will come, he will audit my books, then there will be a dispute and I'll get a decision, the first decision after 5 years. By going into AR, I have just preponed the entire time frame, the dispute. If it is to happen, let it happen today so that I am not bearing, number one, interest. Number two, today I can collect the tax from Tarunji, but tomorrow once the agreement is fruitified or closed, Tarunji will say, sorry, Gaurav, now the transaction is over. So I am saving myself by going into AR. AR, I am not going for a judicial decision. Right, sir? So, Tarun bhai, don't quote AR as an authority.
Right, right. लेकिन अभी हम लोग ना, the point I raised for AR is because nowadays the departments are issuing notices and they are quoting AR decision saying कि AR ने ये बोला तो अब आपके ऊपर भी लग जाएगा, मतलब तो ये गलत हो रहा है.
सर, जहां डिपार्टमेंट को सूट करेगा वो तो ये बोलेंगे कि ये लग गया, और जहां पे नहीं सूट करता वो बोलते हैं AR नहीं मानते. Sir, you read the section. AR is only applicable on right, that right. applicant and his jurisdictional officer.
Correct, correct. सही बोल रहे.
So I don't buy this arguments. Right. We will have to look into the logic. We have to see what argument has been taken and upheld. I'll also tell you one small example. In the case of unit container, printing the quantity is a prerequisite. Now, in one of the cases, in my own case, the SSC, one of the clients, was not printing any quantity. The decision says, since Tarunji and Gaurav, who are the supplier and the buyer, both know what is the quantity in that container, because it is only one piece, there is no need to print that quantity on the container. Still, it is a unit container. Sir, meaning thereby you are inventing a new definition. Will you buy that AR for any other client? No, sir. So we have to see what is the logic. I'm not saying whatever decision they have given, they have power to do that. But we also have to see that this particular body is a judicial body. This particular body is a quasi-judicial body. You don't have to equate a court and a authority. We have to respect the authority because they are trying to ease our work. वो जो 5 साल बाद की गलती है वो आज हमारे सामने ला रहे हैं कि देखो साहब ये आपके साथ this is the dispute which might arise, but this is not the end of the world. चलिए sir, I'll proceed on to the second amendment which has been I have been told to deliberate on, is the recovery from the assessee. We have two forms, GST 1, GST 3B. What is GST 1? GST 1 is the outward supply, the details of outward supply, which I'm supposed to tell to the government. There are two parts to it, B2B, B2C. I'm not going into the other deemed exports, export. I'm just leaving them out, exempted supply. Now, there are multiple parts to this form, GST 1. I am supposed to pay the taxes declared in GST 1 and GST 3B. In the ideal scenario, when the law was framed, the whole idea was that whatever I declare in GST 1 will automatically travel to GST 3B and I have to pay the taxes in GST 3B before filing. That was the whole idea. But there is nothing which came into force. 2 and 3 never, we have not seen 2 and 3 ever. It was only for a part of a month where 2 was effected and withdrawn. Now, in this kind of a scenario, there was, in the past 4 years, the government has seen that many of the assessees, they declare the turnover in 1. And when I'm saying many, allow me the permission, allow me the convenience, this many will not be more than 2%. Those assessees, they declare and they do not pay taxes in 3B. Government was trying to capture these kinds of culprits, these kinds of evaders, and therefore, while I would say in the last 4 years, this monitoring never happened, that the differences are there, we should immediately take action against that particular person. What is the entire damage which happened in the country? After 3 years, number of inquiries were mushroomed across the country, whereby the person who was a recipient, he was called, he was put to trial. That said, you have taken the goods from Mr. X. Now we are not able to find Mr. X. You are supposed to pay us the tax which Mr. X has not paid. Now, who is Mr. X, sir? Sir, Mr. X is one person who has bought the goods from Mr. Y. Who is Mr. Y, sir? Mr. Y from Mr. Z. Who is Mr. Z? Sir, Mr. Z has not paid the taxes in cash. Now, entire chain I have to answer today, where if this question would have been asked to me 3 years back, I would have been in a better position because I have recently done a transaction with Mr. X. Government got to understand this, that there cannot be a postmortem to this kind of situation. We have to immediately put a question to both the supplier and the buyer. And we have to recover this amount from the supplier, make it a tax recoverable. The government was not able to make a tax recoverable without adjudication. So they have now inserted an explanation to section 75, subsection 12. For the purpose of this subsection, the expression self-assessed tax shall include tax payable in respect of details of outward supply furnished under section 37, but not included in the return furnished in 39. Now, all of us are practicing. Can anyone tell me one simple thing? Is there any mechanism to tell whether a tax which has been declared in 1, has that tax been paid in 3B or not? So, in GSTR 1, I have declared a tax of 100 rupees. I have to pay 10 rupees of the last month also. In 3B, I have paid 100 rupees. Now, have I paid in 3B the amount which is declared in output supply? And I have paid that in 39 also. Sir, one has to understand, in 3B, the amounts which are declared are not on a period basis. Shubhamji, correct me if I'm wrong. It is not on period basis. It is not on a one-to-one kind of a correlation. And therefore, when we are talking about 3B, it becomes fungible. What is fungible? If I tell you I am putting 100 rupees into my bank account, tomorrow I put 200 rupees in my bank account, third day I'm spending 50 rupees. So, sir, this 50 rupees is out of what? Which amount? 100 or 200? Sir, you cannot tell. It is fungible. It has all become a part of a common pool. So the very line which is being written that whether the assessee has paid the taxes, nobody can tell. It is fungible. If you want to run this kind of a mechanism, it has to be put to one kind of a test. Okay. Now the second question. What do you mean? But not included in the return furnished under 39. Sir, if I fail to put something in 39 because I misdeclared in one, can I rectify that particular one in subsequent period? Sir, that rectification will happen only in subsequent period. It will not happen in that tax period. And when will the notice come to me? Sir, notice will come to me for that tax period. So again, I'm telling you, this will cause a lot of inconvenience to the assessee. And last, when they say self-assessed tax, how is it worded? Notwithstanding anything contained in 73 or 74, where any amount of self-assessed tax in accordance with the return furnished under 39 remains unpaid, either wholly or partly, or any amount of interest payable on such returns unpaid, the same shall be recovered under the provision of 79. Meaning thereby you don't have to go under the rigor of 73 and 74. You can straight away effect a recovery. Now comes the fear factor. Sir, I have declared one amount inadvertently in one, or I missed to declare something in 4 months back in the return in GST 1. I am declaring it now, but taxes are paid. What will happen? So government understood this particular problem. So they came out with instruction number 1/2022, dated 7th of January 22, where a reasonable opportunity has to be given to the assessee before initiating the recovery under 79. That is the instruction given. Now, sir, what is the matching mechanism? How the notice will be issued? Will it be ASMT 10 or will it be any other notice? Will the assessee put that particular reply into such manner that that particular reply is not called in again and again by the officer? I'll tell you in one of the cases, there was a difference in a month. First of all, a notice for a month was issued. Sir, you have a difference between 1 and 3B in this month. Parallelly, there was a notice issued for a quarter. And very interestingly, the notice was also issued for the year. Sir, इतनी गलती नहीं करिए कि 3 notice एक चीज पे कर दे. Very, very simply, what I'm trying to tell you is, even though the government is, believing that the officers will understand and it will be put to rest, it is not as easy for the ground level practitioner or the businessman. When you go to the officer, we have seen that multiple times same inquiry comes up. It has to be a permanent solution. And number 2, what if the assessee says, sir, galti se ye amount dal gayi, it is not a tax on the misdeclaration. It is a tax on the supply. Can you tax a misdeclaration? Let me say, there is a gentleman who has put up 1 lakh rupees in GST 1. B2C mein chala gaya. Are you under your powers in the act? Can you tax an amount which is not a supply? You have 2 powers. Either it is a supply or it is an amount collected as tax. Unless these 2 elements are established, there cannot be a recovery from the person. So in my humble opinion, 7512 serves no purpose. There is a gap. There is a gap. Understood, sir. The person need to explain that gap. But if the person says, sir, galti se chala gaya amount, I am ready to get myself scrutinized. I am clean. वो amount एक misdeclared amount था. I am ready to write and see. I have also got a confirmation from the other party. He has not taken the credit. The moment you have, there is no automatic recovery under 79. You cannot recover an amount which is not a tax. We then have to go back to the constitution. Right, sir? So 7512, in my humble opinion, will definitely invite a lot of litigation, a lot of disputes, a lot of bank freezings in the coming days to come, where the things are not even needed. The officers have to be very, very sensitive. I think somewhere the entire debate, the cohesiveness of understanding between the department and the businesses have to be there, that not every error is a evasion. If we get into that thought process, and yes, when I'm saying this, I'm also appealing that all the practitioners and businesses should be sensitive, that there should not be any kinds of misdeclarations, evasions. You can do errors, but those errors should always be errors. They should not be evasions guised as errors. Beware of this fact. In those particular cases, the person should be put to test. Last provision, which I am, again, Shubhamji has been kind to give this one part to me, section 151, power to call for information. Commissioner under section 70, we all know how the powers have been used by the officers to collect information in relation to a case and how the proceedings go. Now, we also have the pleasure of Venuji. Venuji has just put in a comment, 7512 cannot be beyond. So, Venuji, if you are there, sir, would you like to add something which I've just said, sir? Are Venubhai, it is lovely to have you with us today.
Venuji को वो करते हैं, unmute करते हैं एक मिनट. Venuji, you can unmute yourself, sir.
No, sir. It's a very happy and heartening to listen to you. So I agree with all your views. I think this section cannot go beyond when supply itself is not there. Where is the question of levy? So this can be challenged. Of course, it will invite litigations and some business to us also.
And I can tell you, Venuji has been instrumental. While we were in Indirect Tax Committee, I had the pleasure to sit with, sit with Shubhamji, Venuji, very, very learned and eminent speakers and experts from across the country. It was a very, very nice learning phase. आपको उतना मजा कभी भी deliberation में नहीं आता जितना learning में आता. I do miss that particular period, and when I say Venuji was instrumental in not only in bringing out those publications in the committee, he was also a very instrumental part in Venuji, forgive me for this, but GSTN के अंदर जो forms आते थे या जो e-invoice आया, उसके अंदर भी I had the pleasure to be part of that same committee which Venuji was, and where Venuji continued further also, because he was he is best of both worlds, technical also and a GST expert also. So IT and GST, he is best of both, I can tell you. So it is a pleasure, Venubhai, to see you after such a long time.
Thank you, and actually good to see you, sir. एक और point I want to add it, and just a food for thought is like again 7512. If we have to continue and read and relate with 155. Now, the burden of the proof is on SSC when it comes to the input tax claim.
Right.
Now, leaving this, isn't it other way saying a negative way of reading? Leaving this, the burden of proof is on the officer. So, if it is ITC, I will prove. Other than ITC, you prove. Because the wording of the section 155 is just burden of proof. So now the 7512, if he is raising, so he should also say that it is evasion and not error. So that's another view which I have to counter argue.
Venuji, I completely agree. But what you are looking forward to is a sort of a equity from the department which never existed.
Right.
You know, if equity would have been there in the country, I can tell you recently, a day before, there was a demand and there was a refund available to the SSC. The SSC netted the two and paid the balance. The entire case was on what? Sir, why have you not taken refund separately and pay us the demand in total? Now, that you're talking about two different SSC. I'm talking about the case of the single SSC. So when the privilege of equity is not available in his own case, how it can be available to him in the case when there is a separate person?
Agree.
So with your permission, I'm only left with one clause. Okay? And Venubhai, on 151, if you want, it will be a pleasure to hear you. If you start, I'll just put on my thoughts.
Nothing. I'm only okay. One thing which I always notice is the amendment which happened in 151 is in a fair way of amendment, because it cannot be a notification. It has to be an order by the commissioner. They cannot give a notification. But what I am also seeing is where it can extrapolate. So can they now start talking to banks or different agencies and give a periodical a return, not just a GST return, but a periodical return to extend their powers in terms of collating some information. Maybe from, they can just talk to an electricity department saying that the commercial entity whose bill raising so much, submit this information. So they can now exercise this power, which I feel is they will start. As of now, in any of the state, I have not seen a single order issued by any of the commissioner. But this draws an attention with the change in the wordings that they would now start using it from different agencies to collect an information and make it as a periodical statement, is what I feel.
And more important is that this section does not limit itself to inquiries, audits, or any inspection. It is so wide. It is saying in relation to any matter. Now, what do you mean by any matter? For that matter, any matter can be anything under this under the sun. If I am just thinking that whether the taxes paid are correct or not, I am not initiated any inquiry. It is also one of the matters because it is a part of the adjudication. And therefore, can I write in connection of that particular matter to any other person to get the information? Is this power somewhere not an unfettered power? That is the question which Venubhai has just raised. So what Venuji is saying is the unfettered powers, whenever they have been given under the Act, they should always be accompanied by either, number one, some checks and balances in form of some guidelines from the highest body, CBIC, or number two, there should be a set of rules which in this case cannot be, for the very simple reason it is not anything which is prescribed. So there we'll not see the rule here. What we can see is again instruction, like in the case of 7512, the government has issued the instruction under 01 by 2022. Similar instruction might come for this particular section. Okay, in what circumstances the commissioner or an officer authorized by him can call for an information, what categories of matters, from what category of people. Otherwise, we will be sitting on number of letters coming from these. Another point which Venuji said very rightly is it is only by an order. Now, my dear friend, when we read this word order, somewhere the bell rings. Okay, it is talking about an order. Can we do an appeal under 109 or 107? No, sir. Under 107, very interestingly, any person aggrieved by any decision or order passed under this Act by an adjudicating authority. When you are calling an information, you are not acting as an adjudicating authority for that different person. So what will happen is, I think when the demand or the information of the demand of information will be too abrupt, will be too vague, or will be too excessive, there will be many people who will be forced to go to courts directly, because then they will have to go for writs. So unnecessarily we are burdening something. If an inquiry is going on, there has to be some definitive circumference within which that inquiry should be undertaken. The quality and the quantity of information both are important. So if you tell a bank, okay, I need the record for 15 years of this gentleman, when you only can adjudicate for last 3 years, is this relevant that you call for 15 years of information? No. So we all will have to see what is the quality. As Venuji has just mentioned, we will have to wait for the first orders to come out. Then only it will be more useful, more fruitful to deliberate on this particular section. Otherwise, right now, this particular section is a power which, till it is effected, nobody will see. Similarly, like the section 155, what Venuji referred. I don't know how many of you have read 155. It is the most important section in ITC. Again, Tarunji will blame me ki Gaurav ji, you are talking like an advocate, sir. 155 is the most important section in ITC. The entire onus has been shifted. Entire onus has been shifted on the SSC himself by 150. Why the section was in 155? Why could not that section be brought in and put nearby the ITC provision? Yes, I understand evidence and informations are on the latter side of the act, but this is beyond that. You are shifting the onus. So my dear friend, 155 was supposed to be a part of 16 section only, in my humble opinion. But nobody looks at 155 and nobody is aware. And I'm again telling you, Tarunji, even department is also not aware.
Sir, एक just clarification कर दे कि when I remarked about you being an advocate, I was just trying to emphasize. नहीं, एक मिनट, just let me just make myself clear कि आप चीजों को इतनी बारीकी से एनालाइज कर रहे हैं एज एन एडवोकेट.
मैं पहले भी करता था, वेनु जी और शुभम जी मेरे साथ रहे.
नहीं, मेरा ये मतलब नहीं था कि आप लिटिगेशन की तरफ जा रहे हैं ऐसा. मैं जस्ट मेक आई एम अप्रिशिएटिंग दैट पॉइंट, सर. आई एम अप्रिशिएटिंग दैट पॉइंट.
Tarun ji, I'm always humbled. You have always been kind to call me deliberate on various subjects in your body. It is always a privilege, and like a friend, I owe and own both a right towards you. कि मैं भी थोड़े light moments आप भी मेरे साथ करते हैं, मैं भी करता हूँ.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And it is my privilege, as always, to deliberate before all of you, all the learned members. With your kind permission, now I think my session timings are over. With the kind permission of chair, I thank each and every one of you for being such a lovely audience and providing me with this particular opportunity as always. Thanks to Venu Bhai, thanks to Shubham ji, Tarun ji, all the learned members. Thank you, sir.
Sir, इसमें एक मेरा क्वेश्चन अभी आपके पास 3-4 मिनट है. With your kind permission, एक क्वेश्चन if you allow. जैसे एक अभी लास्ट 45 जीएसटी काउंसिल मीटिंग में एक क्लैरिफिकेशन आया था, फिर एक सर्कुलर आया कि ऑन माइनिंग द इंटेंशन ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट वाज ऑलवेज दैट द रेट ऑफ जीएसटी विल बी 18%. मतलब माइनिंग पे जो रॉयल्टी देते हैं उस पे जीएसटी का रेट 18%. दैट वाज द इंटेंशन ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट फ्रॉम 1 जुलाई 2017 इटसेल्फ. तो जो माय क्वेश्चन इज दैट देयर आर वेरियस एडवांस रूलिंग्स which have said that the rate will be 18% from 1st January 2019 only, and uske pehle jo hai it will be rate of the goods. Now, will this circular or this decision of the GST council, which shows the intention of the government, will it overrule all those advance rulings? या advance ruling जो जिन्होंने ले लिया वो बच गए 5%, 10%, 18%, 12% पे, और जिन्होंने नहीं लिया अब वो बेचारे फंस गए, या मतलब what is your thought on that?
सर देखिए, जो आई थिंक यू आर रेफरिंग टू सर्कुलर नंबर 164 ओनली ना.
सर्कुलर का नंबर याद नहीं, लेकिन अभी रिसेंटली जो आया था.
तो रिसेंटली जो ये आया है नाउ, दिस पर्टिकुलर इट केम इन अक्टूबर 21. sir, इसमें मैं 2 points add करूँगा. एक, number one, whether the amount recovered by the government for granting these rights of mining, is it a supply or is it something which is attributable to some other article under the constitution? Now that is one question which is still sub judice,
Right.
which is before the court.
Right.
Right. So without going into that particular question, we believe that it is supply.
Huh.
Again, now we are sitting on two particular set of questions, whether it will be from 2017 or 2019. Tarunji, we have to keep our, we all know the answer, what we believe. And it apparently looks like 2019. But again, I'll tell you, till the first question is decided, it is not right to go further on other question. We should focus on whether that particular amount itself is exigible to GST or not. And thereafter, we should start deliberating on the other aspects of taxability in mining. So I would put it that let the matter take its own toll. Don't take a decision. Anybody who has a confusion, they should go for an advanced ruling. And I can tell you there are a number of examples, not only in minings, but other industries also, where you will find varied positions by various officers.
Correct.
Same officer. I'll not put the exact case before you. Same officer, 3 SSCs. 3 different kinds of orders he has passed.
Acha.
Taxable at 5%, taxable at 18%. So we are right now in a very initial stages of GST. Nobody is to be blamed, but yes, the brunt is on the businessman.
Right.
It is that kind of a situation in the country. Somewhere some respite. एक तो ये penalties हटनी चाहिए. अगर आपने ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा टैक्स लेना है तो टैक्स और इंटरेस्ट होना चाहिए. It's a very early stage for a GST, act like GST. सर्विस टैक्स के अंदर 8 साल तक लोग 8 साल after 2013 they were getting respites from tribunal. It is a new act. The SSC is still to learn. 94 का act 2000 तक रिलीफ आ रहा था. और आप 4 ही साल में पेनल्टीज सोच रहे हैं कि लगा दीजिए. इनको तो सब पता होना चाहिए था. पहले दिन इन्होंने पूरा एक्ट क्यों नहीं पढ़ा? सर, नॉट पॉसिबल. It will, I would say, it will become a part of the system for both business, profession, and government over a period of time. There are a lot of things, Tarunji, which we will see. मैं mining को ऊपर थोड़ा सा इसलिए specifically नहीं बोल रहा. Again, I'm telling you, ये जो question आपने put up किया है, I can, if I start on this topic, I'll take half an hour with you sometime separately. Done, sir?
ठीक है. I'll call you maybe sometime some other time.
It'll be a pleasure.
And
Separately we'll discuss on that. I can see Acae bhai also joining us now.
Yeah, Acae sir is also joined. Welcome, Acae sir. And we have once again Venu sir also. Thank you so much everyone for, this is such a enriching platform for all the learned faculty to now be part of this session. Thank you so much. Sir, I have just one query which I have received in my personal chat box, sir, which is regard to mutuality. So I think you had mentioned that maybe in case of mutuality, if there is a perpetual succession involved, in that case, there is a separate entity. So in case of a lot of companies, which are Section 8 companies, where there is a perpetual succession actually involved there. So in case of those, do you think that 71AA would be directly referring even to the contribution there?
I am saying 71AA is not required. They will straight away fall within the purview of 71. And if you're talking about Section 8 companies, first clarify, are we talking about non-profit companies?
Right, sir.
Okay, na? Now, when I talk about non-profit companies, my dear friend, there is a lot of things which we, the chair, if they will invite me sometime, that is one of my most favorite topic, charitable institution. I would dwell upon the topic where I'll tell you, I spoke today about contribution versus consideration. That day, I will definitely talk about what is consideration. And even small examples like if I am giving you 10,000 rupees, so as to feed cows and the other animals, will it be a consideration or a donation? Right, sir? If I'm giving you money to teach in government schools, Is it consideration or donation? A lot of things will cry donations for upbringing a child, education, health. So you are funding the education of 50 children through cry. Is it donation or consideration? That is a separate topic. Allow me the liberty to be with you and dwell on this topic sometime later. Consideration versus donation itself is a 1.5 hour topic. करेंगे sir, इसको भी करेंगे.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Gaurav ji. Now,
Thank you, ji.
thank you so much for all your time, and I think it was a very lively, wonderful session with full of examples, and the way sir you started and explained the concept of mutuality with such a simple example. I think that made the entire scenario very clear, and we could understand this complex topic and this entire subject with such an ease. I think that is the quality, sir, that you have, that you make such complex things understand in such a light way. And sir, we apologize that you could not complete some parts of the topic that you wanted to cover. But we will surely, between myself, Shubham, and Shivani is not here today. She has some other session. So otherwise she would have been here. So between myself, Shubham and
Shivani ji is now a TED speaker.
Ah.
And we are glad to see
yes,
her on so many other platforms. I think कई बारी देख के लगता है कि this GST में कहीं पे हम बहुत सारी चीजें छोड़ दी. The way she spoke about life and other things.
right.
She is altogether a different speaker now.
एकदम. But आज उनका सेशन एक दूसरे स्टडी सर्कल में GST पे है. So she then requested me to play her part. So between me, Shubham and Shivani, we will surely decide on a date with your convenience, and we will surely want that you come on our platform once again and discuss the topic of consideration and charitable institution, because that is a very important topic, I think, for all of us to understand. Thank you, sir, so much for your time, and I will just share the e-memento that we have for you, sir. It's a very... Is it visible, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. The small e-memento that we have for you. We will mail it to you and also WhatsApp this to you. If you can get it printed and framed and put it in your library, so we will be happy that it finds a place in your showcase. Thank you so much. With these words, and now I will hand it over to Shubham to take this session forward. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tarun bhaiya, and I think this has been one of the most wonderful sessions that we have attended, where sir has discussed threadbare the topics which had been allotted to him, which I think has been a fascinating learning experience for all of us. So thank you so much, Gaurav sir, for your sparing your time and enriching all of us with your knowledge. Now we have another wonderful speaker with us who has been very instrumental in making sure in the last 1 year we have enriched our members with GST, and he has been one of the pillars of our knowledge distribution, knowledge dissemination for the members and in GST. So welcome, Abhay Desai sir. We are very happy to have you on this topic of where we are discussing the important amendments. So please, thank you so much for joining.
Pleasure is mine, and especially if Gauravji is on the other side. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Sure, sir. I'll just like to formally introduce you. Sir is an All India rank holder at CA examinations. He has done his LLB and DISA qualified. He started his practice with Yagnesh Desai and Company. He has authored numerous ICI publications, including the Guide to GST Audit and Annual Returns. He's authored the book Get Ready for GST. He has been a co-opted member of IDTC of ICI. He's consulting and into various litigation practices up to Supreme Court of India. He's a member of the GST group made by ICI for making recommendations to central and state government. He has addressed more than 500 seminars on indirect taxes till date. He has made representations even before the Finance Minister and Deputy Finance Minister of India. He's presented papers on various RRCs organized by Bombay Chartered Accountants Society. He has presented papers across India. at various locations. He has published more than 300 articles. I am sure that if you go to any website, go to Google and see the amount of articles that sir has published and the insights that he has given, it is actually brilliant. Board member of NGO based in New Delhi. He's advisor to various Fortune 500 companies as well as large listed companies in the field of indirect taxes. He is a winner of the All Gujarat Elocution Competition organized by Bar Association. He has been awarded the best column writer by the Gujarat Sales Bar Association. He's a brain trustee in Gujarat seminar by Bar Association. I think the amount of accolades that sir can have is actually immense. So there is no shortage of the amount of achievements that sir has already had. I'm sure he has curtailed his profile with. I know that there are so many achievements which he has not given. So, sir, thank you so much for joining us. And once again, we are very happy to have you. And the topic which we are having today for you is the important amendments when it comes to 1st January 2022, which has been made till now. And we had a first part of the discussion which was very was taken by Gaurav sir in so much of depth that we have had a very interesting session, and now we have a very interesting session with Abhay Desai sir as well, who would be taking up a few other aspects of 1st January 2022 amendments. Sir would be taking up amendments relating to detention, search and seizure, impact of new section 16(2)AA and 36(4), the impact on provisional attachment after removal of the word pendency and insertion of initiation, and the Supreme Court extension order after the third wave of COVID, as we say. So I think we have a very interesting discussion for the next 1.5 hours available with us. And I'm sure sir will have a lot of ideas which he wants to share with us. Sir, the floor is all yours, waiting for you to start the session. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening to all. First and foremost, I'm grateful to the association, to Shubham Bhai, to Tarunji, to all of the senior members who are listening today on this webinar. It's always a pleasure. Before I start, in fact, it happens often in cricket that once a Virat Kohli completes his innings, then a follow-on batsman who comes after Virat Kohli is in a very tough spot because people have a lot of expectations as what has been displayed by Gauravji. And I hope I am able to live at least maybe 50% of what probably he has tried to convey through his session on certain important aspects. Now, friends, before I start,
मैं सिर्फ एक चीज यहाँ पे इंटरप्ट करूंगा सर. You and your contribution in the last 1.5 years, I am often tempted to copy paste from your PPTs, but मेरे अपने ethics रोक देते. The quality of PPTs I have seen on LinkedIn, I think the amount of knowledge which you encapsulate within 1.5 hours is huge, sir. So, sir, I'm very humbled before you with the kind of knowledge you have, sir. I think I can make only a part of that contribution.
Thank you, sir. We always learn a lot from seniors like you, so it's always a pleasure. Now, friends, before I start, I'm just reminded of one very good anecdote that I recently read. हुआ ये कि एक युवती थी, वो खुद को काफी ये समझती थी कि she is a good looking girl. एक प्रवचन सुनने गई वो एक साधु जी के पास. साधु जी ने कहा कि देखिए, अहंकार गलत चीज है, अहंकार आदमी को नहीं करना चाहिए, जितना हो सके उतना आदमी को नम्र रहना चाहिए. तो उसने साधु जी से कहा कि साधु जी, ये बात तो आपकी सही है कि अहंकार नहीं करना चाहिए, बट जब भी मैं खुद का चेहरा शीशे में देखती हूँ तो बहुत प्रसन्नता से फूल उठती हूँ कि इतनी सुंदर मैं हूँ. तो अब ये उसमें ऐसे सिचुएशन में मैं क्या करूँ? तो साधु जी ने बहुत बढ़िया जवाब दिया. उन्होंने कहा, देखिए, मैंने कहा अहंकार करना गलत चीज है, खुद को डिसीव करना गलत चीज नहीं है. सो कई बार ऑफिसर्स जब प्रोविजंस पढ़ते हैं तो काफी बार ऐसा लगता है कि वो क्या पढ़ रहे हैं, या फिर हम कुछ और पढ़ रहे हैं और वो कुछ और पढ़ रहे हैं. एंड इट ऑफन हैपन्स जीएसटी में कि जब ऑफिसर्स प्रोविजंस को पढ़ते हैं तो प्रॉबेबली वो समझ नहीं पाते, काफी बार वो ओवरबोर्ड चले जाते हैं, काफी बार जो लिखा नहीं होता उसके बियॉन्ड चले जाते हैं, काफी बार जो टाइम टेस्टेड प्रिंसिपल्स है, जो टाइम टेस्टेड प्रपोजिशंस है, जो टाइम एंड अगेन कोर्ट्स ने बार बार रीइटरेट किए हैं, उनको काफी बार इग्नोर कर देते हैं, ब्लेटेंटली इग्नोर कर देते हैं। और काफी बार टैक्स पेयर्स को फिर रेमेडी के लिए हाई कोर्ट्स के दरवाजे खटखटाने पड़ते हैं, वहां जाना पड़ता है, और काफी हद तक हाई कोर्ट्स इसमें स्टेप इन करती है और रिलीफ देती है। आज का जो सेशन है हमारा, उसमें जो मैं प्रोविजंस कवर करूंगा, व्हाट शुभम भाई हैज पॉइंटेड आउट, विल कवर बेसिकली फर्स्ट 16(2) में जो नई कंडीशन डाली हुई है, we'll see what is those conditions and what are the ramifications or issues that will emanate out of that particular amendment. Then we'll see the provisional attachment, the entire concept of initiation of the proceedings vis-a-vis pendency of the proceedings, how that aspect will be looked at. There is also another amendment in that same amendment, which basically probably has not been reflected in the list of topics related to provisional attachment, but which I think is very much substantial. That now the law also permits the officer to provisionally attach the property of the beneficiary of the fake invoicing or the alleged fake invoicing scheme. So because the ambit of provisional attachment also stands expanded, not only in terms of what proceedings are covered in that, but also as regards the persons whose property can be attached over and above the particular concerned taxpayer. So that is again something which is very important, and in times to come we'll see department, once they start realizing that they have this power. कई बार ये होता है, छोटा बच्चा होता है, उसको पता नहीं चलता कि ये उसके पास क्षमता है और वो उसको एक्सप्रेस नहीं कर पाता। जैसे जैसे उसकी क्षमता बढ़ती है और जैसे जैसे उसको ख्याल आता है कि मेरे में ये भी क्षमता है, so he starts then expressing those qualities. Similarly, officers भी ये सब जो क्षमता अब उनको दे दी है by virtue of this amendment, total disregard of law, total disregard of Supreme Court judgment, because government भी जिस तरह से amendment लेके आई है, ऐसा लगता है कि somehow उनको दुख हुआ pendency शब्द से, so उनको कहीं ना कहीं ये करना था कि उनके पावर्स को उनके ऑफिसर्स को अनलिमिटेड पावर मिल जाए प्रोविजनल अटैच करने का, कल जाके कोई कोर्ट उसमें खलल ना डाले. But somehow we have some kind of balance. We'll discuss those aspects also. Then we'll discuss aspects related to detention, search and seizure. This is again very important because the entire law has been sort of recasted. जो 1 जनवरी 2022 से पहले का जो लॉ था 129 एंड 130, वो पूरा बदल गया है. समझना बहुत जरूरी है कि उसके तहत कैसे प्रोसीडिंग्स इनिशिएट होंगे, कैसे प्रोसीडिंग्स कंक्लूड होंगे, और जो भी एग्रीव्ड टैक्स पेयर है या एग्रीव्ड ट्रांसपोर्टर है वो किस तरह से उसको डील करेंगे, किस तरह से उसमें आगे जा सकते हैं इन द न्यू आफ्टर द अमेंडमेंट. And then we'll discuss the Supreme Court aspect, where they have on a suo motu basis basically restored their first order to so as to say that the period, the COVID period, we'll discuss what is that period, but the whatever judicial or quasi-judicial proceedings that are supposed to be undertaken during that COVID period, the time limit for that the entire COVID period would get excluded for the purpose of calculation of the period of limitation. So we'll see practically how that will work, and in the specifically in the context of GST, at what all places you can apply that particular, you can take rather the benefit of that particular Supreme Court order. So this will be our agenda for today. In the meanwhile, if anyone has any questions related to a particular topic that we are discussing, I am comfortable either during the session when we are discussing that particular aspect, you may unmute yourself or you may put it in the chat box and just draw my attention to that fact, and I will consider that question there and there itself, or else at the end, if time permits, we can take up whatever issues that you might have on the given topics. Now, let us start with the first, a little bit of background. I'm sure Gauravji would have given some background regarding how the amendments has been brought into law and how they have been enforced. So basically, we are discussing Finance Act 2021 related amendments. In fact, it's ironical कि 2 दिन बाद बजट आ रहा है, वो फाइनेंस बिल 2022 लेके आएगा, और हम आज डिस्कस कर रहे हैं 2021 का जो फाइनेंस बिल था, उसके तहत जो फाइनेंस एक्ट में अमेंडमेंट्स आए उसके बारे में. बट दिस इज द, अब कई लोग ऐसा पूछते हैं कि इसका मतलब 2022 का अमेंडमेंट जो भी बिल में आएगा वो अभी पढ़ने की जरूरत नहीं है, वो अब नेक्स्ट जनवरी में जब सेशन होगा तब देखेंगे. But that is the reality, because GST takes time for the government to really notify the amendments. So anyway, जो amendments आए हैं उसमें there are amendments you can bifurcate into 3 broad categories. One are those amendments that have already been notified prior to 1st January. Basically, these are the 2 amendments. One deals with the aspect of interest, the levy of interest on the tax which is payable on the outward side, that is under section 50 subsection 1. There is also one more proposed amendment that we'll see in the current finance bill that will deal with the aspect of interest in respect of wrong availment or erroneous availment of input tax credit and the utilization of that such credit. So that aspect, probably once the amendment, we'll see the text of that amendment, we can discuss that. But what has already been amended is only qua the output tax, the interest liability qua the output tax. So that already is in effect. It's a retrospective amendment. The interest would be calculated only on the cash portion of the liability, provided that liability is discharged through a return that is filed on a self-assessment basis. It should not be a return that is filed after the department initiates an action under 73 or 74, and on the basis of the issues raised in those proceedings, you, after the launch of such proceedings, you file the return, and then you intend to take the benefit of this proviso, that expressly the proviso do not allow you to take that benefit. But certainly that again is an aspect which will be questioned in the courts as we move ahead, but that is not for today's discussion. The second amendment that already stands notified is the aspect of the self-certification filing of the reconciliation statement. Anyway, what we are discussing is the second bucket, that is the amendments which have been now brought into force from 1st of January. Barring the amendment that Gauravji has discussed, that is dealing with the aspect of clause AA to section 7.1, all other amendments that we are going to discuss today are all prospective. That will come into effect from 1st of January. There is only one amendment, one group of amendment rather, that is yet to be notified. These are the amendments dealing with section 16 of the IGST Act, where there are 2 significant changes. One is the benefit of zero rating is intended to be given only in respect of the supplies to SEZ, only qua the authorized operations. Currently, the way the law stands, the law does not distinguish between supplies to SEZ for authorized operations vis-a-vis non-authorized operations, because the SEZ has primarily 2 broad areas. One is the authorized operations area, where actually the industries are based, and another is what is commonly known as a residential area within that SEZ, where the employees who are probably engaged in that SEZ activities are locating, which is known as a non-processing area. So the way right now the law is, any supply to an SEZ unit or a developer enjoys the benefit of zero rating, although they have made a rule where they say that if you want to claim refund, then refund will be permitted only to the extent of credit that gets accumulated in respect of supplies made for authorized operations. So only for a refund, there is an additional condition brought in through Rule 89. However, the benefit of zero rating remains available for all kinds of supplies to SEZ unit or developers. That is now sought to be curtailed by saying that only the benefit will be extended for authorized operations. That amendment is yet to be brought into force. And another amendment dealing with section 16 is that the lawmakers want to make the zero rated supplies, that is exports plus SEZ, by saying that the default route for making those supplies would be without payment of IGST under a letter of undertaking. For the class of taxpayers or for the class of supplies, the government will issue a notification whereby those categories of suppliers or class of supplies would be able to undertake the zero rated supplies with payment of IGST and accordingly claim the refund of that IGST. So that again is something which we don't know the background behind it, what government is actually thinking for this. Is it more to do with right now there is a gap between Section 16 and certain conditions that they've brought in through rules? Because Section 16 as on date only allows the government to come with the manner and prescription of the way in which you can avail the refund. There is no express power given in the Act to basically curtail those refunds. However, as you are aware, government has repeatedly kept forming the rules where somewhere some restrictions are getting added. And whether this amendment is to basically bridge that gap by saying that now law also has that provision that only in case of notified categories, this option of making supplies with payment of IGST would be available. For all other categories, they have to compulsorily undertake those supplies under LUT. So only time will tell how that amendment will play around. But as on date, that amendment also remains to be not notified. So we will be concerned today with the second category of amendments, which have now come into force from 1st of January. Now, the first amendment that we'll deal with is on the aspect of input tax credit. Now, Section 16(2) provides for certain conditions. One additional condition is added now in terms of clause AA to 16(2) by saying that the person shall not be entitled to the credit of input tax unless the details of the invoice or the debit note, which has been referred in clause A, has been furnished by the supplier in the statement of outward supplies, and such details have been communicated to the recipient in the manner which has been specified under Section 37. So essentially what the amendment says, that the entitlement of credit would now be based on an additional condition in terms of the supplier furnishing the details of the invoices or the debit notes in their statement of outward supplies, what is known as GSTR1, and such details getting communicated to the recipient in the manner that is specified under Section 37. So we'll deal with the issues once we understand the basics of this amendment. But one important aspect that has to be kept in mind here is that this new condition only deals with the input tax credit, which is availed on the basis of invoices or debit notes. So it does not cover cases of imports where you avail the credit based on bill of entry. It does not cover cases of it does not cover cases of reverse charge in a situation where the suppliers are unregistered. Where the suppliers are registered, there this amendment would get covered, because in that situation, the document based on which you avail the credit, if your supplier is registered, but that supply is under reverse charge, is the invoice issued by that supplier. So for example, if there is a transporter who is registered in GST and operating under the reverse charge mechanism, then the invoice that the transporter issues is the basis under clause A for you to be entitled for the credit. So since it is covered under clause A, unless that transporter does not furnish that details of that invoice in his GSTR1, and unless those details are not communicated to you, you will not be able to avail the credit if the transporter is registered. If the transporter is unregistered, in that situation, the credit that you need to avail is based on your preparation of invoice under Section 31(3)(f). So that is not the invoice for which you need to furnish the details as your outward supplies in your GSTR1. So those invoices are not covered under the new clause. Only the invoices issued by registered suppliers where the transactions are under reverse charge, those invoices would get covered under the new clause. As we discussed, import will not get covered. ISD again will not get covered. Now, given this fact, let us see how the rule has been amended, because as you are aware, there was a parallel rule 36(4), which used to, when it was brought into picture, it gave a room of 20% that you can avail the credit to the extent of 20%, with a cap of 20% over the eligible credit, which is reflected in your statement, which is available in the form of 2A. That was reduced then to 10, and then it was brought down to 5. And now how the rule 36(4) stands. As you can see, that rule has been substituted by way of notification 40 of 2021. Now that rule says that no credit shall be availed by the registered person in respect of the invoices the details of which are required to be furnished under subsection 1 of section 37. Unless the details have been uploaded by the supplier, that is, details have been furnished by the supplier in their GSTR1 or using the invoice furnishing facility in case of quarterly taxpayers, and such details have been communicated to the registered person who is availing the credit in form GSTR2B, that is under Rule 60, Sub-Rule 7 of the CGST rules. And then there are two provisos that remain as it is. These are basically essentially the provisos which were brought into picture because of COVID impact, where instead of applying Rule 36(4) on a monthly basis, this proviso granted the benefit in terms of applying the Rule 36(4) on a cumulative basis when there was this room available to avail the credit even beyond what is available in 2A to the extent of 10 or 5% or 20% as the case may be. Now let us see the issues. I hope this is clear. This is the bare reading of the two amendments, the amendment in the Act and the amendment in the rule. Now let us see issues, and we'll again come back to these provisions when we deal with the issues. Now the first issue that we want to deal with is that whether new condition is required to be met before taking the credit in the electronic credit ledger, or even if the said condition, if let us say complied subsequently, then also can it be said that the credit that has been availed by that particular person is legitimate and it is in accordance with law. Now, why I am saying that? Because there is a difference in the language between the Act and the rule. Let us first understand that, and then you will be able to understand the issue. Issue, I believe, let me put a simple example for you to appreciate the issue. The issue is like this, that let us say someone misses filing GSTR1 by the due date. Let us say on 11th, he could not, the vendor of, let us say one taxable person, the vendor of that person could not file the GSTR1 by the due date. Even by the due date of filing 3B, that person is still not in a position to file its GSTR1. However, I am availing the credit of the tax that he had charged on the invoice based at the time of in the records, and then that credit I reflect also in the return that I filed on 28th of the month. Now, my vendor, who basically is a defaulter, because in a sense that he did not file GSTR1 within the due date, he files his GSTR1, let us say, on the 25th of the month. So after I file my 3B, thereafter he files his GSTR1. So at the end of day, when the officers come for their audit, the officers look at my GSTR2B for this particular month. They do not find this transaction reflected in that 2B. But when the officers look at the 2B of the next month, they find that duly that vendor has reflected that transaction, and accordingly in 2B the same is there. Now, can the officer say that still you violated this condition of this new condition in terms of 16(2) AA read with this Rule 36(4), and therefore the credit that you availed in the first month for our discussion is wrong, and that credit deserves to be recovered? Can that view of the officer sustain? That is because this is something which will practically happen often. One way to deal with it is to say that in the first month you do not avail any credit. You stick with what the figure in 2B is. You don't consider this invoice. You remain totally in compliance with the law as understood right now by the department, or will be understood by the department in times to come. And therefore you do not take the credit. You wait for the next month to come. And in the next month in 2B, since you find this invoice, there in that particular month, you avail the credit. But this is something which is possible only for those taxpayers who are wealthy. ऐसे टैक्सपेयर के लिए पॉसिबल है जिनके पास बहुत पैसा है, वो वेंडर को भी जीएसटी दे चुके होंगे और सामने यहाँ जीएसटी डिपार्टमेंट को भी दोबारा जीएसटी देंगे सरकार को, क्योंकि सामने वाले वेंडर ने GSTR1 टाइम लिमिट में फाइल नहीं किया और 2B में वो इनवॉइस उनको नजर नहीं आ रहा। ऐसे काफी वेंडर्स है अपने देश में जिनके पास कैश फ्लो उतना अवेलेबल नहीं रहता, उनके मार्जिन से सिंगल डिजिट्स में होते हैं, उनके पास यदि आप ये लेके भी जाओ थियोरेटिकल बात कि भैया आप देखो अब तो 2B ही आपको फॉलो करना है रिलीजियसली, 2B में नहीं है तो नहीं ले सकते, वो कहेगा साहब आपकी बात तो ठीक है बट मेरे पास वो GST देने का पैसा ही नहीं है। यदि मैं ये क्रेडिट छोड़ देता हूँ जो 2B में अभी नहीं दिख रही, यदि मैं क्रेडिट छोड़ देता हूँ तो सिचुएशन ये होगा कि मुझे मेरा जो आउटपुट टैक्स का जो कैश पेमेंट है वो बढ़ जाएगा, उतना मेरे पास फंड्स ही नहीं है। तो कहीं ना कहीं ऐसे इश्यूज को हमें एड्रेस तो करना पड़ेगा। क्लाइंट्स को ये बोल नहीं सकते कि नहीं भैया ये फंड्स नहीं है तो उसका तो मेरे पास आंसर नहीं है, बट तुम्हें 2B के बिना तो एक कदम आगे या 1 रुपया भी ज्यादा 2B से जा नहीं सकते। अब ऐसे सिचुएशन काफी आएगी, अब इसको कैसे हम डील कर सकते हैं। अब हम जब फाइनल वे में देखेंगे ये लॉ को तो एक चीज सामने जरूर आएगी कि जो सेक्शन 16(2) की जो नई कंडीशन है, जो क्लॉज AA है, वो केवल कब अप्लाई होता है। सेक्शन 16(2) कहता है कि नो रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन शैल बी एंटाइटल्ड टू द credit. So this section basically deals with the aspect of entitlement of credit. This section does not deal with the aspect of when you can take the credit. In the entire act, as far as the input tax credit provisions are concerned, the act has clearly differentiated between 3 events rather. First is the event of taking the credit. Another is the event of reflecting that credit in the return so that it gets added to your electronic credit ledger, allowing you to either utilize that credit or claim refund if that is the case, if you are eligible under the law. And the final stage where whatever credit that you have availed in your records and reflected in your return and now forms part of the electronic credit ledger that probably either remains in balance or utilized or claimed as refund, whether you are entitled for that credit or not. So these are principally the 3 stages in which the law seeks to operate. Now 16(2), if you see the language, it operates at the 3rd stage because it clearly says that the person shall not be entitled to the credit. And even if you see the other conditions, if you see the rest of the 4 conditions, forget about clause AA. If you see the rest of the 4 conditions, the condition related to the actual payment of tax, if you find that that condition is valid, then that condition can never be satisfied before either taking the credit or reflecting that credit in the electronic credit. एक simple example मैं देता हूँ, एक टैक्स पेयर है, टैक्स पेयर के पास इनवॉइस आया, उसने सप्लाई इनवर्ट सप्लाई उसको मिला, उसके पास इनवॉइस आया, वो इनवॉइस का जो टैक्स अमाउंट है उसने उसका क्रेडिट अपने रिकॉर्ड में लिया, जो उसको रिकॉर्ड सेक्शन 35 के तहत मेंटेन करना है फॉर अवेलिंग द क्रेडिट, उसने वो रिकॉर्ड में क्रेडिट अवेल की। वो क्रेडिट जब उसने अवेल की और जब अब रिटर्न भरने जा रहा है, वो लेट अस से 19th को वो 3B रिटर्न भरने जा रहा है, तब उसके पास ये नॉलेज नहीं है कि 19 से पहले वो वेंडर ने 3B फाइल किया होगा और टैक्स का पेमेंट किया होगा। वो 19th को रिटर्न फाइल करेगा ये बेसिस पे कि ये मेरी क्रेडिट वैलिड है, मैंने ले तो ली है, अब इसका एंटाइटलमेंट qua the condition of payment that will be verified only post facto. मैं अभी क्रेडिट लेजर में ले लूंगा, फिर बाद में फाइनली डिपार्टमेंट के एंड से जब वेरिफिकेशन होगा और पता चलेगा कि इसका टैक्स का पेमेंट वो कर चुका है, उसने शायद रिटर्न 20 तारीख को फाइल किया और मान लीजिए उसने रिटर्न 1 महीने बाद भी फाइल किया, फाइनली जब डिपार्टमेंट जब वेरीफाई करने आएंगे और तब डिपार्टमेंट के पास ये फैक्ट है कि उसने ये सप्लाई पे टैक्स भर दिया है, जो सप्लायर है, तो ये केस में डिपार्टमेंट फिर आपको नहीं बोलेगा कि आपने जल्दी क्रेडिट ले लिया, आपने 19th को कैसे रिटर्न में क्रेडिट रिफ्लेक्ट किया, आपको तो वेट करना चाहिए था, वो 3B फाइल करे और उसके अगले मंथ आपको क्रेडिट लेना चाहिए था, यदि ये कंडीशन सेटिस्फाई करनी है बिफोर द स्टेज ऑफ टेकिंग द क्रेडिट। बट ये व्यू तो न डिपार्टमेंट कहेगा न कोई कोर्ट कहेगा, डिपार्टमेंट कहेगा नहीं नहीं, ये जो पेमेंट कंडीशन है, जो क्लॉज C है, वो तो आपको सेटिस्फाई करनी है एट द 3rd स्टेज। So once you take the credit in the records, once you reflect that credit in your returns, then when we come for verification, you need to satisfy us whether the tax was actually paid by the concerned vendor or not. If not, then we will say that you are not entitled for the credit. We'll issue the show cause notice under 73 or 74 as the case may be, and we'll recover the credit that you are not entitled for. So the conditions that are given in 16(2) cannot be read in a manner to say that all the 4 and now additional 5th conditions have to be always met before the date of or the stage of taking the credit. It is infeasible, impractical, and there is a established principle of law that law cannot expect the taxpayer to do the impossible. So what I am submitting is like this, that all these 5 conditions necessarily have to be met. But at what stage? That stage is not uniform for all the 5 conditions. You cannot say that all the 5 conditions have to be either met before taking the credit, all the 5 have to be met eventually, or all the 5 have to be met before crediting that amount into the electronic credit ledger in terms of filing of 3B. जैसा मैंने कहा 3 स्टेज है. मेरा सबमिशन ये है आप सबके सामने कि जो पहली कंडीशन है डॉक्यूमेंट की, वो आपको सेटिस्फाई करनी है बिफोर टेकिंग द क्रेडिट इन योर रिकॉर्ड्स. It is the only logical way in which you can reconcile this entire subsection 2. अभी ये AA पे मैं आता हूं. B देखते हैं. जो B कंडीशन है जो लॉ में, जो रिसिप्ट की कंडीशन है कि आपको गुड्स और सर्विसेज मिले होने चाहिए, वो भी कंडीशन आपको सेटिस्फाई करनी है बिफोर टेकिंग द क्रेडिट. ये 2 कंडीशन है, डॉक्यूमेंट एंड रिसिप्ट. They have to be met before you take the credit in your records because these are substantial conditions. और ये condition है, it is based on the transaction level information. So transaction level obligation जो है vendor पे invoice issue करना, जब वो supply करे, जो section 31 में साफ दिखता है कि by latest he has to issue the invoice when he removes the goods, and services में within 30 days from the date of completion of service he is supposed to issue the invoice. That is the end time limit given in law. So if you have to reconcile that provision by saying that since the law mandates for the vendors to issue the invoice, it's a transaction level obligation, and therefore for availing the credit at the other end, the recipient also have to meet this condition before he takes the credit in his records. So invoice condition and the receipt condition, both of them have to be met before the stage of taking of the credit in your records. Now, once the credit has been taken, now the second stage is crediting that amount into the electronic credit ledger. For that, you need to go to the last condition, which says that filing of the return is mandatory for you to basically transfer that amount from your records, which you are maintaining of availment of credit, to the electronic portal. Why? Because ये credit मैं मेरे record में रखूंगा, तो I cannot utilize it. What I can utilize is only what is there in the electronic credit ledger. So for that second stage, I have to meet that last condition in terms of filing of return under section 39, because only when I file the return, I can transfer that amount into the electronic credit ledger for utilization. Now coming to the actual payment condition and this new condition by way of clause AA. Now when these conditions are to be met. Now actual payment condition, everyone agrees, is required to be met after the stage of crediting that amount into the electronic credit ledger. It is after that stage that ultimately the verification has to happen as to whether the concerned vendor had actually paid the tax or not. Probably he could have paid the tax even belatedly, but finally whether he has paid the tax or not needs to be verified. And if not, then only some recovery of that credit is possible. Now in the midst of that, now we are facing this new condition AA. Where do we fit this condition in this entire 3-stage process? Do we say that this condition have to be met before the taking of the credit? Do we say this condition have to be met before crediting that amount into the electronic credit ledger? Or do we say that this condition have to be met eventually before the department in terms of establishing that that transaction stands reflected in my on the portal by way of filing of one by the vendor? Now, what I'm saying is very interesting. See, ultimately, if you see the thought process of the government has not applied any thought process. Now, why I'm saying that? I'm saying that because on one side, when they brought this amendment, they also made one parallel amendment in 7512. अब वो 7512 का amendment क्या कहता है? It deals with the entire concept of self-assessment. It says in case of a self-assessed tax, no show cause required, immediate recovery under 79 possible. So एक बार self-assessed tax आपने declare किया, तो सरकार आपसे ये नहीं पूछेगी कि ये आप कब भरोगे, कैसे भरोगे, भरोगे कि नहीं भरोगे, क्यों आप नहीं भरोगे, ये सब कोई सवाल नहीं पूछेगी. सीधा 79 का प्रोसेस लॉन्च करेगी, प्रोसीडिंग्स लॉन्च करेगी, आपके बैंक को लेटर लिख देगी, आपके कस्टमर्स को लेटर लिख देंगे कि भैया आप इनको पेमेंट मत देना, हमें सीधा पेमेंट दे दो, आपकी प्रॉपर्टी अटैच कर लेंगे और आगे प्रोसेस शुरू करेंगे रिकवरी के. अब उसमें उन्होंने एक नया एक्सप्लेनेशन जोड़ा जो सेम डेट को इफेक्ट में आया, जो डेट को ये नया क्लॉज इफेक्ट में आया 1 जनवरी 2022. वो एक्सप्लेनेशन ये कहता है कि यदि GSTR 1 में कुछ आपने शो किया और रिटर्न में जो फर्निश कर रहे हैं आप 3B, उसमें यदि आपने वो इंक्लूड नहीं किया तो वो डिफरेंस को भी हम सेल्फ असेस टैक्स गिनेंगे और हम डायरेक्ट रिकवरी उसकी पॉसिबल करवाएंगे। तो अभी जो सिचुएशन खड़ी ऐसे हो रही है कि एक तरफ कानून कहता है कि यदि 1 में उसने रिपोर्ट किया कोई ट्रांजैक्शन जो मेरे वेंडर ने, और यदि उसका टैक्स नहीं पे किया तो वो उससे रिकवरी होगी, डायरेक्ट रिकवरी होगी, बिना कोई शोकॉज दिए, बिना कोई एजुडिकेशन किए। जबकि मुझे कहा जाता है रिसिपिएंट को कि भैया उसने क्योंकि 1 में टाइमली डाला नहीं ट्रांजैक्शन, 1 में उसने रिपोर्ट नहीं किया जो भी 11 तारीख को फाइल करना था उसमें, इसीलिए ये कंडीशन आपकी सेटिस्फाई नहीं हो रही और इसके वजह से आपकी क्रेडिट आपको अलाउ नहीं की जाएगी। तो यदि ये व्यू सस्टेन होता है तो होगा क्या, डिपार्टमेंट डबली एनरिच होगा। एक वहां से तो उनके पास डायरेक्ट रिकवरी का मोड है, और यहाँ ये जो प्रोविजन के तहत जो नया कंडीशन है उसके तहत मेरी आईटीसी भी डिनाई होगी। अब ये जो व्यू है ये व्यू सस्टेन नहीं करेगा फॉर द सिंपल रीजन कि ये आर्टिकल 14 के कॉन्फ्लिक्ट में आएगा। ये पूरा एक आर्बिट्ररी व्यू हो जाएगा, एक व्यू एक ग्रॉसली अनफेयर पोजीशन हो जाएगी कि एक तरफ आप उसको सेल्फ असेसमेंट टैक्स का लेबल दे रहे हो, जो लायबिलिटी उसकी है वो, एक तरफ आप उसके लिए डायरेक्ट रिकवरी का नियम बना रहे हो, और दूसरी तरफ बोल रहे हो कि क्योंकि उसने ड्यू डेट में 1 में ये ट्रांजैक्शन रिपोर्ट नहीं किया, हम उसकी आपको आईटीसी भी अलाउ नहीं करेंगे। और ये क्योंकि यदि ये व्यू लेते हैं कि ये आईटीसी लेने से पहले, बिफोर टेकिंग द आईटीसी यदि ये नियम अप्लाई करना है, तो इसका मतलब ये होगा कि आईटीसी जब मैं ले रहा हूं वो स्टेज में यदि ये 2B में नहीं है तो वो आईटीसी फिर मैं ले नहीं पाऊंगा। ये व्यू मेरे हिसाब से सस्टेन नहीं होगा। सो जो क्लॉज है डबल है उसको हार्मोनियस रीडिंग उसी तरह से हो सकता है कि इट इज अकीन टू द पेमेंट कंडीशन, जो इवेंचुअली देखी जानी चाहिए कि जब फाइनली जब हिसाब होगा सितंबर में, जब 1 अमेंड करने का टाइम खत्म हो चुका होगा, मेरा क्रेडिट लेने का टाइम खत्म हो चुका होगा, जब वो दिन जब हिसाब होगा तब क्या पोजीशन निकल के आ रही है, तब यदि सामने मिलता है कि वो ये 1 में रिपोर्ट कर चुका है, भले उसने 3B में ना किया हो, बट तब वो सेल्फ असेस टैक्स का मान के डिपार्टमेंट उनसे रिकवरी करेगा टैक्स की, और ना कि मेरी आईटीसी डिनाई कर पाएंगे। तो कहीं ना कहीं मैं ये समझता हूं और मेरा ये सबमिशन है आप सबके सामने कि ये जो कंडीशन है डबल है वो एंटाइटलमेंट डिटरमाइन करती है, बट एंटाइटलमेंट कब डिटरमाइन करती है, आफ्टर द फाइलिंग ऑफ द रिटर्न, नॉट बिफोर द फाइलिंग ऑफ द रिटर्न। सो दैट इज व्हाट आई एम ड्राइविंग इट। हाउएवर अब ये तो डबल ए पढ़ के निकल के आ रहा है, बट उन्होंने रूल में क्या बताया, रूल में एक कदम आगे चले गए। रूल में क्या बताया, रूल में उन्होंने लैंग्वेज यूज की कि नो इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट शैल बी अवेल्ड। रूल ये कहता है कि सेक्शन तो एंटाइटलमेंट डिटरमाइन करने के लिए कंडीशन लेके आया, रूल एंटाइटलमेंट को समझता है कि इट इज सिमिलर टू अवेलमेंट। सो रूल मेकर जो है एग्जीक्यूटिव, वो कहीं ना कहीं कंफ्यूज हो गए कि वहां एंटाइटलमेंट हम डिटरमाइन कर रहे हैं आईटीसी का, और यहां हम कह रहे हैं कि भैया आप अवेल ही नहीं कर सकते ये आईटीसी जब तक आप ये 2 कंडीशन नहीं सेटिस्फाई करोगे कि सामने वाला जीएसटीआर 1 में इसको रिपोर्ट करे और आपको 2B के स्टेटमेंट में वो ट्रांजैक्शन नजर आए। सो कहीं ना कहीं इट इज ओवर रिच, इट इज गोइंग बियॉन्ड द एक्ट। जब एक्ट एंटाइटलमेंट की बात करता है तो एक्ट जब एंटाइटलमेंट की बात करता है और एंटाइटलमेंट के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ये कंडीशन डाल रहा है, तो रूल नहीं बता सकता है कि हम एंटाइटलमेंट को अवेलमेंट से रिप्लेस करके अवेलमेंट के स्टेज पे ये कंडीशन अप्लाई करेंगे। ये कहीं ना कहीं ये रूल इज गोइंग बियॉन्ड द एक्ट। So certainly, in my opinion, as far as first issue is concerned, ये आपको मैं यदि बताऊं, एक सिमिलर एग्जांपल दूं, तो सेंट्रल सेल्स टैक्स एक्ट में आप सब जानते हैं, उसमें एक प्रोविजन थी सेक्शन 8 में कि यदि सी फॉर्म के सामने आप सेल करोगे तो आपको कंसेशनल रेट में सेल करने का मौका राइट होगा। सी फॉर्म के सामने सेल नहीं किया तो आपको हायर टैक्स लगेगा, जो भी रेगुलर टैक्स है वो पर्टिकुलर कमोडिटी पे। अब उसमें इतने सारे जजमेंट्स है कोर्ट्स के, जहां कोर्ट्स ने कहा है, वहां पे भी आप लैंग्वेज देखोगे तो ऐसी लैंग्वेज है कि जो फॉर्म है वो आपको वो क्वार्टर में मिला होना चाहिए, जो क्वार्टर में आपका ये इंटरस्टेट सेल था, जिसके तहत आप ये सी फॉर्म के का बेनिफिट लेके कंसेशनल रेट पे आप सेल आपने किया। कोर्ट्स ने टाइम एंड अगेन कहा है कि ये बेसिकली फाइनल कंडीशन है ये डिटरमाइन करने के लिए कि सी फॉर्म अल्टीमेटली वो डीलर के पास अवेलेबल है कि नहीं है. सो इवन बियॉन्ड द क्वार्टर, जब स्ट्रिक्ट रीडिंग आप वो सेक्शन का करोगे तो वो क्वार्टर में यदि सी फॉर्म नहीं मिलता तो वो सेल इंटरस्टेट सेल एट कंसेशनल रेट कानून नहीं गिनता. बट क्योंकि कोर्ट ने इसको इस तरह से गिना कि ये कंडीशन है फॉर फाइनली डिसाइडिंग whether that sale was eventually done against the C form or not. So even if that dealer is able to procure the C form even 1 year down the line, or maybe even after assessment at the appellate stage, even at those stages, he has the option of furnishing the C form, which technically is now beyond the statutory time limit. And still he can retain that benefit of making those sales at a concessional rate. So in that context, if you see those rulings, the law, the courts have looked at the entire context of that particular condition, and then they have said that you have to respect the reality of business, and based on that, certain conditions at what stage they are to be applied, they need to be analyzed and understood. It is not the case as if some condition is there in law, that condition will strictly have to be followed within the specified time frames given in law. So I believe that aspect also is to be considered here, and therefore as far as the first issue is concerned, there is clearly a conflict between 16(2) and Rule 36(4), and therefore that entitlement cannot be substituted with availment, so as to say that before availment you need to satisfy that condition. That probably is an overreach and needs to be challenged in times to come. Second issue, अब कई बार ये होता है कि 11 तारीख को वो वेंडर फाइल नहीं करता वन, बट 12 तारीख को 13 तारीख को कर देता है. अब मुझे 2B में रिफ्लेक्ट तो नहीं हो रहा, बट 2A में वो दिखता है, बिकॉज जब मैं 3B भरने जा रहा हूं तो 2A में तो ये मुझे दिख रहा है. अब ये केस में क्या ये क्रेडिट में ले सकता हूं, जहां मुझे पक्का पता है कि अब उसने वो सेल्फ असेस लायबिलिटी कर ली है. अब यदि ये पैसा नहीं भरेगा वो, तो डायरेक्ट रिकवरी पॉसिबल है. कानून में भी अब उसकी प्रोविजन बन गई है. जो पहला सिचुएशन था हमारा, जो पहला इश्यू था, उसमें 20 तारीख को जब मैं रिटर्न भर रहा हूं तब मैं श्योर नहीं था कि वो फाइनली उसको रिफ्लेक्ट करेगा कि नहीं वन में. बट अब ये सेकंड सिचुएशन में तो अनडिस्प्यूटेड फैक्ट है कि वो वन में रिपोर्ट कर चुका है. गलती इतनी की है कि वो वन में देरी से रिपोर्ट कर उसने किया है. इसके वजह से वो मंथ के 2B में रिफ्लेक्ट नहीं हो रहा, बिकॉज एक स्टैटिक डॉक्यूमेंट है. वो 2A में रिफ्लेक्ट हो रहा है, जो एक डायनामिक डॉक्यूमेंट है. अब ये केस में, ये पर्टिकुलर सिचुएशन में क्या हम व्यू ले सकते हैं. अगेन मैं टैक्स पेयर्स को 2 कैटेगरीज में बांटूंगा. एक जो पैसेदार टैक्स पेयर है, पैसेदार टैक्स पेयर तो ये सब झंझट में पड़ेगा नहीं. वो कहेगा ठीक है भैया 2B में ले लो, बाकी का नेक्स्ट मंथ देखेंगे. नेक्स्ट मंथ में तो पक्का आएगा, बिकॉज 2A में आ रहा है तो नेक्स्ट मंथ में तो पक्का 2B में आएगा, अनलेस वो वन में कोई अमेंडमेंट करे. बट बाय एंड लार्ज वो 2B में सर्टनली ऑटो पॉपुलेट होगा. तो बात एक ही महीने की है, अभी लो बाद में लो, पैसेदार टैक्स पेयर को फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा. जो टैक्स पेयर है जिनके पास वर्किंग कैपिटल की कमी है, जिनके पास इस तरह से फंड्स नहीं है, मान लीजिए एक ही वेंडर है उसका, और वेंडर के वहां जैसे मान लीजिए एक मोबाइल का डीलर है, अब वहां जहां वो होलसेलर से खरीदता है उसके वहां मान लीजिए कुछ प्रॉब्लम हुआ, वो कोरोना हो गया अकाउंटेंट को. वो 11 तारीख को 10 तारीख को तो कह के गया था कि पक्का मैं फाइल कर दूंगा वन आपका कल आके, बट बेचारा 11 तारीख को सुबह फोन करता है कि साहब मुझे कोरोना हो गया है, आ नहीं सकता. क्वारंटाइन का अभी तो गवर्नमेंट का रेगुलेशन है सेल्फ क्वारंटाइन का, तो अब मुझे तो वो रेगुलेशन मानना पड़ेगा 11 तारीख को. तो मैं तो 5 दिन नहीं आऊंगा, मैं 16 तारीख को आके आपका वन 100% अपलोड कर दूंगा. तो वो 16 तारीख को आता है, वन अपलोड कर देता है. अब आपको दिखता है 2A में, बट 2B में दिख नहीं रहा. अब आप मोबाइल के डीलर हो, मोबाइल के डीलर को 5% मार्जिन है, और एक ही ये वेंडर है जो मुझे सप्लाई करता है एक ही ब्रांड का मोबाइल. अब मान लीजिए मैं पूरा आउटपुट टैक्स भर दूं वो मंथ कैश से, और ये जो क्रेडिट जब नेक्स्ट मंथ ऑटो पॉपुलेट हो, तो क्लाइंट आपसे कहेगा कि ये क्रेडिट तो शायद मुझे 2 या 3 साल लगेंगे इसको यूटिलाइज करने, बिकॉज मेरा मार्जिन ही 2-3% है. अब आप कहते हो कि ये महीने में मैंने 1 करोड़ का सेल किया तो 18 लाख रुपए मैं कैश भर दूं, जबकि 18 लाख में सामने 17.5 लाख मेरी क्रेडिट है. 17.5 लाख बाद में अगले महीने आप कह रहे हो ले लो, पर 17.5 लाख अगले महीने में मैं जो लूंगा वो मुझे 10-12 महीने लगेंगे उसको यूटिलाइज करते करते. तो मेरे तो 18 लाख, अभी 18 लाख जो मैं आज भरूंगा, तो ऐसा तो है नहीं कि वो पैसा कोई कॉस्ट नहीं है वो पैसों पे. देयर इज सर्टेनली अ ह्यूज कॉस्ट ऑन दैट मनी. So who will then bear that cost? जबकि यहाँ साफ केस है. There is a genuine reason why he could not file GSTR1 on 11th and why he filed on 16th. अब ऐसी काफी फैक्ट्स आएंगी, ये तो एक एग्जांपल है, काफी ऐसे डिफरेंट सिचुएशंस आपके सामने आएंगे. अब ये केस में भी आप जब जरा देखेंगे 16(2)(a), वो क्या कहता है? एक तरफ कहता है डिटेल्स फर्निश की होनी चाहिए आउटवर्ड सप्लाईज की, वो तो उसने की है, वो कंडीशन यहाँ सेटिस्फाई हो रही है. और ये डिटेल्स कम्युनिकेट की होनी चाहिए इन द मैनर स्पेसिफाइड अंडर सेक्शन 37. सो एक्ट क्या कहता है कि जो कम्युनिकेशन का मैनर होना चाहिए वो होना चाहिए एज स्पेसिफाइड इन 37. अब 37(1) तो इतना ही कहता है कि जो भी आउटवर्ड सप्लाई का जो स्टेटमेंट फाइल करोगे उसके डिटेल्स इन द प्रिस्क्राइब मैनर कम्युनिकेट टैक्स पेयर को होगी. अब जब हम रूल में जाते हैं, रूल 60 में, तो वहां हमें 2 टाइप के कम्युनिकेशन मिलते हैं. यहाँ पे कोई नॉट विथस्टैंडिंग क्लॉज नहीं है, ना कोई नॉन ऑब्स्टेंट क्लॉज है. जहां एक तरफ 60 सब रूल 1 कहता है कि जो डिटेल्स कम्युनिकेट करनी है वो 2A के फॉर्म में कम्युनिकेट करनी है, और जहां एक सब रूल 7 कहता है कि 2B के फॉर्म में कम्युनिकेट करनी है. वहां पे कहीं ये नहीं बताया कि 2A सुप्रीम है या 2B सुप्रीम है. वहां सिर्फ इतना लिखा गया है कि 2A में भी कम्युनिकेट होगी डिटेल और 2B के जरिए भी कम्युनिकेट होगी, और दोनों सब रूल एक इंडिपेंडेंट सब रूल की तरह ऑपरेट करते हैं. अब लॉ जो है 16(2)(a) उसमें तो केवल इतना ही लिखा है कि कम्युनिकेट होनी चाहिए इन द मैनर प्रिस्क्राइब्ड अंडर 37. अब 37 में तो कोई मैनर वैसे प्रिस्क्राइब नहीं है, जो प्रिस्क्राइब है वो रूल में है, और रूल में 2 मैनर प्रिस्क्राइब किए हुए हैं. तो किस मैनर को हम यहाँ समझेंगे कि अप्लाई होगा? अब रूल क्या कहता है? रूल तो सर्टनली जो रूल बनाने वाला है वो तो साहब के पास गया होगा और कहा होगा साहब अभी ये सिचुएशन आई है हमारे पास. यहाँ एक्ट बनाने वाले साहब ने तो 37 का जिक्र कर दिया यहाँ. अब जब आपने 37 खोल के देखा तो वो रूल 60 पे ले जाता है. रूल 60 खोल के देखते हैं तो वो तो दोनों बात करता है, 2A और 2B की. अब करे क्या? तो उसने कहा एक काम करो, गवर्नमेंट का पैसा ज्यादा से ज्यादा किस में आएगा? कहता सब 2B कर दो, तो 2B में तो लॉक हो जाएगा 11 तारीख को फिगर. तो उसके बाद जो भी होगा वो अगले महीने ही क्रेडिट लेंगे. तो गवर्नमेंट का ज्यादा फंड कलेक्शन 2B से ज्यादा होगा. 2A करोगे तो फंड कलेक्शन कम होगा, और दूसरा 2A वेरिफिकेशन एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिवली डिफिकल्ट हो जाएगा, बिकॉज 2A जैसा मैंने कहा इट्स अ डायनामिक डॉक्यूमेंट, इट विल कीप ऑन चेंजिंग. सो 2A का जो फिगर है वो डिपार्टमेंट के लिए वेरीफाई करना विल बी अ चैलेंज, एंड सिमिलरली फॉर टैक्स पेयर आल्सो आफ्टर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम, बिकॉज नोबडी कीप्स अ लॉग ऑफ डे वाइज what was there in 2A or the amendments based on that are then reflected in the 2A. So they took a very easy way out and they said, what we'll do in rule 36(4), we'll say the manner of communication is 60 sub rule 7, which is 2B. Now the conflict is this, that can this sustain on one side when the section, if you are with me on that first argument that entitlement versus availment, then there is no question. Then you can always say that forget about 2A 2B. मैं तो next September में ही check करूंगा क्या है 2B में या 2A में, and based on that I will see whether any credit needs to be reversed or not. If you are not with me on that argument, saying that नहीं ये ज्यादा हो जाएगा entitlement versus availment वाला issue, एक काम करते हैं, एटलीस्ट कंप्लाई तो करना है हमें ये नियम, बट अब कंप्लायंस में हमें इस तरह से भी नहीं करना है कि जैसा मैंने एग्जांपल दिया वो मोबाइल ट्रेडर का कितना हार्श हो जाए कि वो बेसिकली टैक्स पेयर को ऐसी पोजीशन में डाल दे जो जहां से वो पॉसिबल ही नहीं है वो कंप्लायंस कर पाए. तो ये सिचुएशन में आप ये कंटेंशन जरूर ले सकते हैं कि जो एक्ट है, एक्ट में जो मैनर दिया हुआ है कम्युनिकेशन का वो केवल सेक्शन 37 का मैनर दिया हुआ है, और सेक्शन 37 के तहत जो रूल फॉर्मेशन हुए उसमें जो 2 मैनर हुए हैं उसमें टैक्स पेयर के पास ऑप्शन है कौन सा मैनर उसको ठीक लगता है ये पर्टिकुलर कंडीशन को अप्लाई करने के लिए. यहाँ लॉ जो एक्ट है उसमें कहीं ये नहीं कहा कि जो 2A है उसको हम इग्नोर करेंगे, उसको आपको डिसरिगार्ड करना है. लॉ में तो रखा है वो मैनर एज अ वैलिड वे टू एंश्योर दैट यू आर एंटाइटल्ड फॉर दैट क्रेडिट. इट इज ओनली द रूल दैट इज रिस्ट्रिक्टिंग दैट इन टर्म्स ऑफ सेइंग दैट out of the 2 manner we'll only consider the second manner in terms of 60 sub rule 7, that is 2B. So there again there is a direct conflict between act and the rule, and therefore here also again if someone is in that position, I'm again saying if someone is in that position where he does not have the funds to pay the outward tax in cash despite the fact that he is aware that credit is available with him but not in 2B but in 2A, those persons can take that credit based on this view that ultimately it is entitlement that is to be seen, number one. Number two, even if we apply this rule on the date of crediting that amount into the electronic credit ledger, one thing is very certain, you cannot apply this new condition before the taking of the credit, because credit is always taken in the records that you are maintaining. In fact, the Supreme Court decision in case of Bharti Airtel specifically and very clearly brings this point out, that credit availment always happens in the records that you are maintaining. Only the crediting part of transferring that amount into the credit ledger is for enabling the utilization of that credit or for the purpose of seeking the refund of that unutilized balance. So it is for that purpose that the second event takes place. Certainly before the first event, this condition cannot be applied. Whether it can be applied before the second event. Now in that second event also, as we discussed, there are two sub-events. One is where the return is filed after 11, but before 20th. In that situation is what we are discussing. I would take a view that certainly a contention can be raised that in the act, since no manner has been prescribed for determining the fulfillment of that condition, when we go to 37 read with rule 60 sub rule 1, 2A is also a valid manner of communication of those details. So I will follow 2A, and before the second stage, if my credit stands reflected in the 2A, I can be considered to have satisfied this condition, because ultimately at the end of the day, the courts are going to look at whether that particular situation, in that particular situation, whether that condition stands satisfied or not. Now, there is a very interesting aspect here involved. Let us say ये सब आप छोड़ देते हैं. Ultimately आप आपके record के हिसाब से credit लेते हैं. सितंबर में आपने देखा सब उसमें दिखता है, चाहे 2A में हो 2B में हो. अब डिपार्टमेंट आपके पास आए. अब डिपार्टमेंट को जब शोकोज नोटिस देना होगा ये पर्टिकुलर एस्पेक्ट में, तो 74 क्या कहता है कि जहां पे आपका एरोनियस अवेलमेंट ऑफ क्रेडिट हो या यूटिलाइजेशन हो, तब डिपार्टमेंट को वो राइट है शोकोज नोटिस देने का, वो पैसा रिकवर करने का. सो यहाँ डिपार्टमेंट कहेगा एरोनियस अवेलमेंट तो है, बिकॉज 36(4) अवेलमेंट की बात करता है ये कंडीशन के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, तो अवेलमेंट तो है. अब अवेलमेंट है, फिर भी 74 की जो एसेंशियल कंडीशन है वो है कि अवेलमेंट होने के बाद आप क्या रिकवर करोगे? रिकवर करोगे जो पैसा आपको ड्यू है. अब ये सिचुएशन ऐसी है जहां पे फाइनली द कंडीशन स्टैंड्स सेटिस्फाइड. सो कैन वी नॉट से दैट डिस्पाइट द रॉन्गफुल अवेलमेंट और एरोनियस अवेलमेंट, स्टिल देयर इज नथिंग लेफ्ट टू बी रिकवर्ड नाउ under 74, which will allow the department to issue the show cause notice, because 74(1) only allows the department to issue the show cause notice if two conditions are satisfied. One is there should be an erroneous availment, and this is very important, and something is to be recovered on account of that erroneous availment. It is not as if every erroneous availment permits them to issue the show cause notice. There should be amount to be recovered. इसीलिए पटना हाईकोर्ट ने कॉमर्शियल स्टील के केस में ये कहा कि केवल अवेलमेंट पे 74 आपने कैसे इश्यू कर दिया, क्या रिकवर करना चाह रहे हो? तो क्रेडिट ऑलरेडी है, यूटिलाइज नहीं किया, तो व्हाट यू आर ट्राइंग टू रिकवर? यू कैन ओनली रिकवर समथिंग which department has lost and taxpayer has gained, which department now considers to be an illegal gain or illegal benefit. So that argument, again, that commercial steel judgment is now before the Supreme Court. So that aspect will again be tested, that how 74 has to be understood, whether mere availment is enough or there should be availment coupled with something to be recovered in terms of some benefit availed by that particular taxpayer that will now have to be returned back to the government. So that aspect here certainly again will be very vital. Now, थर्ड एस्पेक्ट इज पेमेंट कंडीशन. अब ये क्लॉज आया, बट क्लॉज सी हमें लगा निकल जाएगा कानून में से, बट वो अनफॉर्चुनेटली नहीं निकला. क्लॉज सी अभी भी वैसा ही है जो कहता है टैक्स का पेमेंट नहीं करेगा तो क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा आपको. अब ये पर्टिकुलरली सिचुएशन है जहां डिपार्टमेंट क्या आपके सामने लेके आएगा. वन तो उसने फाइल कर दिया, सामने आपने उसका क्रेडिट भी ले लिया, बट कहीं ना कहीं वो डिफॉल्टर निकला, वो बैंकरप्ट हो गया, इंसॉल्वेंट हो गया, उसके पास पैसे नहीं थे, उसने 3B फाइल नहीं किया, या 3B फाइल किया बट टैक्स का पेमेंट नहीं किया. अब ये सिचुएशन में डिपार्टमेंट क्या करेगा? एक तरफ तो जैसे मैंने आपको बताया 75-12 में सेल्फ असेसमेंट टैक्स का इसको नोमेनक्लेचर दे दिया है ये सिचुएशन को, तो डिपार्टमेंट को वहां रिकवरी करनी चाहिए। अब वहां रिकवरी एफर्ट्स जो डिपार्टमेंट लगाएगा, पैरेलल डिपार्टमेंट प्रोसीडिंग नए इनिशिएट करेगा रिसिपिएंट के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, और तब डिपार्टमेंट क्या कहेगा 16(2)(c) में, क्योंकि सामने वाले ने टैक्स का पेमेंट नहीं किया, मैं आपका ये क्रेडिट आप एंटाइटल नहीं हो और इसके वजह से ये क्रेडिट को हम रिकवर करना चाहेंगे। दैट विल बी द व्यू। नाउ इफ यू थिंक दैट व्हाट विल हैपन आफ्टर दैट स्टेज, लेट अस से वो जो सप्लायर है उसके एंड से कोई रिकवरी हुई, या वो फाइनली आईबीसी में गया और आईबीसी कोर्ट ने फाइनली कहा कि भाई जीएसटी का 100 रुपया देना है, 50 रुपए दे दो, इंटरेस्ट वेवर, पेनल्टी वेवर, और ये कंपनी को वाइंड अप करो और उसको खत्म करो, जो भी डिसीजन वहां आएंगे। अब ये सिचुएशन में क्या डिपार्टमेंट आपको आके कहेगा कि भैया वो जो हमने आपसे जो क्रेडिट ले ली थी ये बेसिस पे कि ये एक्चुअल पेमेंट ऑफ टैक्स नहीं था, वो अब हमें पता चला है कि भाई ये डेवलपमेंट्स बाद में हुए हैं, तो अब ये एज ए गिफ्ट हम आपके सामने लेके आए हैं कि अब आप इसको 3B में ले सकते हैं, जो भी 2 साल 5 साल 10 साल जब भी ये प्रोसेस उसके सामने खत्म हो, सप्लायर के सामने, तब क्या ऐसी कोई प्रोविजन कानून में बनाइए? एक तरफ सेल्फ असेसमेंट टैक्स का करार दे दिया, उसका जो लायबिलिटी है उसको, एक तरफ मुझे कहा कि वो नहीं भरेगा तो आप भी क्रेडिट नहीं ले सकते। और तीसरा जो सवाल है जो इसके साथ जुड़ा हुआ है कि वो फाइनली भरेगा या फाइनली कोर्ट उसको कहेगा कि भरने की जरूरत नहीं है, वो कोर्ट का डिस्क्रिशन था, उसके तहत वो कोर्ट कहता है, तो वो सिचुएशन में क्या होगा उसका कोई कानून में जवाब नहीं है। कहीं ना कहीं जब ये कंडीशन नहीं थी, सेल्फ असेसमेंट उसको नहीं गिनते थे, तब एक डिपार्टमेंट के लिए जस्टिफिकेशन पॉसिबल था कि भाई दोनों में से हम एक की तरफ जाएंगे और हम वहां से पैसा हमारा इकट्ठा कर लेंगे। डाइबिथाइल के केस में मद्रास हाईकोर्ट ने यही पॉइंट पे स्पेसिफिकली डिपार्टमेंट को पूछा, डिपार्टमेंट के काउंसिल को, वो रिपोर्टेड जजमेंट है उसमें ये चीज लिखी हुई है कि आप हमें एक बात बताइए, आप रिकवरी किससे करना चाहते हैं? आप रिकवरी सप्लायर से करना चाहते हैं, रिसिपिएंट से करना चाहते हैं, एक कोल्यूजन है वो एस्टैब्लिश करना चाह रहे हैं, आप क्या रहे हैं कि जिससे आप सीधा रिसिपिएंट पे चले गए और कहा कि ये क्रेडिट के लिए एंटाइटल नहीं है। So that aspect now becomes more burning because of this new condition, and saying that amount that he is reflecting in one is a self-assessed tax. So again, something this will be, it will add more support to the fact that now that actual payment condition should not be actually enforced. When on one side, you are declaring that one liability, GST or one liability as a self-assessed tax. I am not discussing situation where there are frauds. Certainly frauds stand on different pedestal. वहां कोर्ट्स बोल सकते हैं कि भाई दोनों को पिनलाइज करो, फ्रॉड किया है, दोनों ने जानबूझ के कॉन्शियसली ये किया है, तो वो केस में फिर कोर्ट्स इस तरह का फेयरनेस की और ये सब चीजें नहीं सुनेगा। इतना ही फेयर बनना था टैक्स पेयर को, तो उसका ढंग से करना था उसको काम, वो जब अनफेयर है तो क्यों कोर्ट फेयर बने? सो दैट एस्पेक्ट अगेन विल बी टेस्टेड in cases involving fraud, but certainly in cases not involving fraud, this aspect I believe should be considered in a sense, saying that once self-assessed tax is there, then the actual payment condition should not be applied qua that transaction. Another aspect is it's a prospective change, but whether it applies to December credit, as I discussed, if you are with me on that front, that this condition applies at the stage of entitlement, then since it comes into effect from 1st of January of 2022, then all the credits that you are entitled on or after that date, all those credits will be hit by this new condition. Since, as I discussed, entitlement is like a verification of exam paper. So जब आपने एग्जाम दिया दिसंबर में, जब आपने क्रेडिट आपके रिकॉर्ड में लिया, तब का जो एंटाइटलमेंट का जो कंडीशन था, उसमें ये एग्जाम में ये क्वेश्चन नहीं था। जो एग्जामिनर को एक स्टैंडर्ड आंसर शीट दी जाती है, जो रख के वो चेक करेंगे पेपर कि भाई स्टैंडर्ड आंसर शीट में ये आंसर्स थे, ये आंसर्स आप में मिलेंगे तो 100 आउट ऑफ 100, ये आंसर आप में नहीं है तो 100 में से 0। वो जो आंसर शीट थी, वो आंसर शीट दिसंबर की जो आंसर शीट थी उसमें ये नहीं था AA। तो जो मेरा दिसंबर का जो क्रेडिट का क्लेम है, जो मैंने रिकॉर्ड में लिया है और अब जाके वेरीफाई होगा, उसमें जो आंसर शीट थी उसमें ये कंडीशन नहीं है। ये आंसर शीट में कंडीशन है 1 जनवरी 2022 से। तो मेरा मानना है कि 1 जनवरी 2022 के बाद जो आप रिकॉर्ड में क्रेडिट लेंगे, उसका वेरिफिकेशन करने का जो आंसर शीट दिया है कानून ने डिपार्टमेंट को, वो आंसर शीट में अब ये कंडीशन डली हुई है, जिसके तहत अब उनको वेरीफाई करना है कि वेदर ये सेल्फ असेस टैक्स फाइनली हुआ है सप्लायर के एंड पे। यदि हुआ है तो फिर उसका क्रेडिट यहाँ वैलिड माना जाएगा। सो दैट इज, इफ यू आर विथ मी ऑन दैट पार्ट, दैट दिस इज टू बी अप्लाइड एट द स्टेज ऑफ थर्ड स्टेज, दैट इज द स्टेज ऑफ डिटर्मिनेशन ऑफ एंटाइटलमेंट। हाँ, आप कहोगे कि ये तो हम पहले ही अप्लाई कर देंगे बिफोर टेकिंग द क्रेडिट, then certainly it applies even to December credits, because if you are going to say that नहीं है मैं तो रिटर्न भरूंगा तभी गिनूंगा कि क्रेडिट ले रहा हूं, और इसके पहले जो भी कानून में वो टाइम पे कंडीशन होगी वो मुझे अप्लाई करनी है, तो in that context you will probably reach a conclusion that this also applies to the December credits. Then ये एक बहुत मजेदार बात हुई। अब आप देखिए इसमें कॉमेडी क्या हुई कि 2 प्रोवाइजो रूल 36(4) में पहले से थे जो ड्राफ्ट हुए थे अर्लियर 36(4) के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, जहां 10% की रूम थी, 20% की रूम थी, जहां इस तरह से 2B का कोई मैंडेट नहीं था। वहां केवल 2B, वहां 2B नहीं लिखा था कि 2B में शो होगा उसका 10% या 20% या 5% करना है। वहां तो केवल इतना ही लिखा था जितना डिटेल एलिजिबल क्रेडिट आपका फर्निश किया है उसका 5% या 10% तक आप ज्यादा ले सकते हो। वहां कोई 60 सब रूल 7 का जिक्र भी नहीं था। अब ये ऊपर का पार्ट चेंज कर दिया, बॉडी में ऊपर का बॉडी चेंज कर दिया, नीचे का बॉडी वैसा का वैसा रखा। अब आज ये ऑफिसर कोई पढ़ेगा ये प्रोवाइज तो कहेगा कि भाई ये सब महीने है, मार्च, अप्रैल, मई, जून, जुलाई, जो पुराने पीरियड के मंथ से, जहां पे ये था कि आप एग्रीगेट करके ले सकते हो, एग्रीगेट करके जो 5% 10% का नियम लगाने। अब उसका जो बेसिक जो ऊपर का बॉडी था वो तो अब निकल चुका। अब जो ऊपर का बॉडी आ गया वो तो कुछ अलग ही बात करता है, 2B की बात करता है, अवेलमेंट की बात करता है। तो अब ये प्रोवाइजो कौन से बॉडी को अप्लाई होगा? उनको बेसिकली ये जो पुराना बॉडी है वो वैसा ही रखना चाहिए था, उसको 31 दिसंबर 2020 तक सीमित रखना चाहिए था, और एक नया बॉडी बनाना चाहिए था। जो अपर पार्ट है जो 36(4) का, वो एक नए बॉडी के रूप में आना चाहिए था, विच वुड हैव अप्लाइड फ्रॉम प्रोस्पेक्टिव इफेक्ट। अब ये दोनों प्रोवाइजो जोड़ दिए ऊपर के बॉडी के साथ, पुराना बॉडी रखा नहीं कानून में। तो ऑफिसर कोई होगा वो कहेगा अब तो ये महीने के लिए भी, यदि ये महीने में अब आज वेरिफिकेशन हम करने जाएंगे और आज ये रूल पढ़ेंगे तो व्यू ये निकल के आएगा कि ऊपर का बॉडी यहाँ भी एप्लीकेबल है, तो उसके बेसिस पे 2B के बेसिस पे ही ये सब एग्रीगेशन होगा। और अब कोई 5% 10% की बात मत करो, वो तो अब कानून में से ही हमने निकाल दिया 5% 10%। सो आई बिलीव दैट अपर बॉडी शुड हैव बीन रिटेन। इट्स अ मिस्टेक, drafting error, certainly a drafting error, hopefully it should get rectified. But in my opinion, this proviso, when you interpret this proviso, it has to be interpreted in context of the earlier subrule 4 and not in the context of the substituted upper body of subrule 4. That would be a correct way to put it, because entire subrule 4 has not been substituted, only the upper body has been substituted. Now we go to the second aspect, provisional attachment. The provisional attachment में time and again courts ने कहा है कि ये draconian power है, because आप assess भी नहीं कर रहे हो वो टैक्स पेयर को, assessment करके उसके पास जो लॉ में available remedies है, अपील फाइल करने की रेमेडी, स्टे लेने की रेमेडी by depositing the pre-deposit amount, statutory pre-deposit amount, वो सब प्रोसेस तो अभी बाकी है होना। उसके पहले ही आप उसकी प्रॉपर्टी अटैच कर लेते हो, उसका बैंक बैलेंस अटैच कर लेते हो, उसका बिल्डिंग फैक्ट्री अटैच कर लेते हो। तो ये एक ड्रैकोनियन पावर है, और ये ड्रैकोनियन पावर की एक सीमा होनी चाहिए। ये पावर इस तरह से नहीं इस्तेमाल होना चाहिए कि एक हैरेसमेंट के रूप में या एक एब्यूज हो ये पावर का। तो ये कॉन्टेक्स्ट में टाइम एंड अगेन कोर्ट्स ने कहा है कि सबसे पहले तो जो अमेंडमेंट से पहले की प्रोविजन थी 83(1), वो कहती थी ड्यूरिंग द पेंडेंसी ऑफ द स्टिपुलेटेड प्रोसीडिंग्स। अब वो बदल गया है आफ्टर द इनिशिएशन ऑफ द स्टिपुलेटेड प्रोसीडिंग्स, और वो जो स्टिपुलेटेड प्रोसीडिंग्स है उसमें भी एम्बिट बढ़ाया गया है। जो पहले का जो पावर था वो एक लिमिटेड प्रोसीडिंग की पेंडेंसी के वक्त इस्तेमाल हो सकता था। अब जो पावर है वो प्रोसीडिंग, जो वाइडर प्रोसीडिंग है उसके इनिशिएशन के बाद at any time that power can be exercised. अब हम इसमें issues देख लेते. Issues से पहले ये procedural part है provisional attachment का. इसमें एक बदलाव जो हम कह सकते हैं इन अ वे पॉजिटिव बदलाव है, वो इस तरह से है कि अटैचमेंट करने से पहले एक नोटिस आपको दिया जाएगा. पहले ऐसा होता था कि बैंक से ही नोटिस आता था, तब पता चलता था टैक्स पेयर को कि अरे बाप रे मेरा बैंक अकाउंट अटैच हो गया. अब वो अटैचमेंट ऑर्डर आपको दिया जाएगा, साथ में बाकी सबको भी दिया जाएगा कि आपका लैंड रिकॉर्ड्स का रजिस्ट्रार होगा, उन सबको दिया ही जाएगा, बट साथ में आपको भी एक कॉपी दी जाएगी कि आपको भी पता चले कि ये सब जो वहां से फिर आपको लेटर्स आएंगे वो किस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आएंगे. और एक एस्पेक्ट यहाँ डाला गया कि ऑब्जेक्शन है आपको यदि ये अटैचमेंट पे, तो आप ऑब्जेक्शंस आप फाइल कर सकते हैं. उसके लिए फॉर्म्स भी बनाए गए हैं. DRC 22 कैपिटल है. दिस इज द फॉर्म थ्रू विच आपको एक हियरिंग भी दिया जाएगा, और हियरिंग के बाद यदि कमिश्नर को लगेगा कि ये अटैचमेंट अब जरूरी नहीं है या जरूरी नहीं था, so they can release that particular property by passing an order. अब ये कॉन्टेक्स्ट में इश्यूज क्या है? इश्यूज, सबसे पहला इश्यू ये है कि इनिशिएशन का अर्थ क्या, क्योंकि अब जो पावर दिया हुआ है वो कहता है कि ऑन इनिशिएटिंग द प्रोसीडिंग, स्टिपुलेटेड प्रोसीडिंग, अटैचमेंट इज पॉसिबल. सो एक केस लेते हैं, मान लीजिए SCN आया. अब जो SCN जो इश्यू होता है वो मान लीजिए सेक्शन 73 का या 74 का SCN है. तो 74 का SCN उसमें लिखा हुआ है एज वन ऑफ द प्रोसीडिंग which will permit them to undertake the attachment. So SCN आया. SCN के सामने, SCN आने के बाद डिपार्टमेंट के ऑफिसर को लगा कि भैया ये एडजुडिकेशन होगा, टाइम लगेगा, सीधा अटैच कर लो उनकी जो भी प्रॉपर्टी अपने को मिलती है. तो अटैचमेंट कर लिया, इनिशिएट हुआ प्रोसीडिंग, बाद में अटैचमेंट हुआ. अब एडजुडिकेशन ऑर्डर पास हुआ. अब एडजुडिकेशन ऑर्डर के सामने मैं शायद अपील में हूं या रिट पिटीशन फाइल की, वॉट एवर इज द केस. अब ये सिचुएशन में क्या प्रोविजनल अटैचमेंट कंटिन्यू रहेगा इज द इश्यू, बिकॉज प्रोविजनल अटैचमेंट अब तक क्या था, पेंडिंग होना चाहिए. अब SCN का प्रोसीडिंग तो पेंडिंग नहीं रहेगा जब ऑर्डर इश्यू हो जाएगा. अब नया प्रोसीडिंग शुरू होगा, अपीलेट प्रोसीडिंग या रिट प्रोसीडिंग. सो सर्टनली वो पेंडिंग तो नहीं था. अब पेंडिंग नहीं था तो सर्टनली वो प्रोविजनल अटैचमेंट फिर सस्टेन नहीं करेगा, क्योंकि ड्यूरिंग द पेंडेंसी ये अटैचमेंट प्रोसीडिंग अटैचमेंट करने का पावर था. अब क्योंकि इनिशिएशन करने के बाद पावर मिला है, सो केवल डिपार्टमेंट को इतना ही सेटिस्फाई करना है कि जो प्रोसीडिंग्स उसमें लिखे हुए हैं वो उन्होंने इनिशिएट किए हैं. वंस दोस प्रोसीडिंग्स हैव बीन इनिशिएटेड, then they get power to make the provisional attachment. So they are widening the scope like anything. So what they only need to do is initiate. Once they initiate, then whether their proceedings are pending, whether their proceedings are concluded, that is immaterial. Now they get power to undertake the provisional attachment, and once that is undertaken, as you are aware, 1 साल के बाद ही वो attachment release होगा, unless before that, जैसा मैंने आगे डिस्कस किया, कमिश्नर के पास आप जाओ, आप ऑब्जेक्शन फाइल करो, and if commissioner is satisfied, only in that situation he will release the attachment. Otherwise, और आप जानते ही हो practically, commissioners are rarely satisfied in such situation. So then only remedy would be to go to the writ court and not only challenge the proceeding, but even challenge the provisional attachment. So that is the only way in which you can basically say to the court that initiation itself was wrong, and therefore the power to provisionally attach also has been wrongly exercised. Now proceedings, the meaning, what are the proceedings, initiation of which can permit provisional attachment? The list is long, expanded. You can see newer additions. Scrutiny of returns now will permit them to provisionally attach. Return scrutinize किया, पता चला 2B में कुछ ज्यादा क्रेडिट लिया है, ऑफिसर ने कहा पूछेंगे सवाल बाद में, अमाउंट देख के अटैच कर लो पहले प्रॉपर्टी. So that is there. Inspection of goods during transit, जो e-way bill related violations, उसमें भी now they can, if they think कि ये केस में पूरा अटैच करना है, they can do it. Summons, बॉम्बे हाईकोर्ट का डायरेक्ट डिसीजन है जहाँ कहा कि समन्स पहले नहीं था, जो अमेंडमेंट आया उससे पहले नहीं था, तो समन करके किसी को बुलाया, टैक्स पेयर को, कोई डिस्क्रिपेंसी मिली या कोई भी सिचुएशन सर्च हुई और सर्च के तहत बाद में स्टेटमेंट रिकॉर्ड करना है, समन्स में बुलाया. और वो जो प्रोसीडिंग पेंडिंग थे समन्स के, जहां प्रोसीडिंग समन के पेंडिंग मतलब समन भेजा और वो प्रोसीडिंग अब तक कंक्लूड नहीं हुए इन टर्म्स ऑफ आइदर रिकॉर्डिंग द स्टेटमेंट और सबमिटिंग द डॉक्यूमेंट्स कॉल्ड इन दैट पर्टिकुलर समन्स. So during that pendency, nothing could have been done. Now, even by issuing summons, proceedings can be said to have been initiated, stipulated proceedings, and therefore they get the power to undertake the provisional attachment. Again, access to business premises, tax collected but not paid. Again, this is a situation where the law says that you need to give a hearing and then pass an order to confiscate that amount which they think is in the form of tax, which has been collected by that particular person, but that has not been deposited with the government. Even initiation of recovery proceedings. Law says once you get an order, unless you don't file an appeal within 3 months, that amount after 3 months becomes recoverable and department can initiate the recovery action unless you have got a stay by way of paying the statutory pre-deposit. To initiate the recovery proceeding, 78 permits that in situation where the department feels that the 3-month time is unreasonable to wait even for 3 months, they can straight away also initiate the recovery proceedings. Now, if they do that, then in that situation also they get the right to undertake the provisional attachment. So, चुन चुन के ढूंढा है पूरे जीएसटी एक्ट में कहाँ डिपार्टमेंट क्या क्या एक्शन ले सकते हैं और जहां डिपार्टमेंट एक्शन ले सकते हैं वो सब प्रोविजंस को यहाँ डाल दिया है, which parallelly will now allow them to also do the provisional attachment. So scope has been widened considerably in two manners. One is instead of requirement of pendency, only initiation is required, and initiation of what? Earlier there were limited set of proceedings, now expanded set of proceedings. In fact, all proceedings you can say which department will initiate except audit. Audit ko abhi choda hai isme. Except departmental audit, almost any section you can think of now is part of this particular section 83. So it's a wide reach. But what we have is something which is a decision of Supreme Court that I'm coming in just a while. ये एक दूसरा इंपॉर्टेंट फैसेट है ये अमेंडमेंट का. ये कौन सा फैसेट है कि 122(1)(a) अभी जब फेक इनवॉइसिंग का पूरा जो चल रहा था अपने देश में, तो बेनिफिशियरी कोई और होता था और जो रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन होता था वो कोई और होता था. अब जब लॉ बना था तब उनको लगा था कि जो रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन है उसी पे जो भी कार्रवाई है वो की जाएगी, उसी से टैक्स रिकवर होगा, उसी का प्रोसिक्यूशन होगा, उसी पे पेनल्टी इंपोज होगी. कहीं ना कहीं फिर instances आए जहां actual kingpin या actual beneficiary were someone else, so they wanted to nab those persons also so that they can also be put to they also be punished. So they made two amendments in section 122 and 132 by saying that penalty can be imposed on such beneficiaries. मान लीजिए एक ड्राइवर के नाम पे रजिस्ट्रेशन लिया, फेक इनवॉइसिंग का किया रैकेट, अब वो ड्राइवर का मालिक है, वो बेनिफिशियरी था पूरे ये रैकेट का, बट रजिस्ट्रेशन ड्राइवर के नाम से था. जो अमेंडमेंट आया वो ये कहता है कि अब जो ड्राइवर का मालिक है उसको भी पिनलाइज किया जा सकता है और उस पर प्रोसिक्यूशन भी लॉन्च किया जा सकता है इफ इट इज फाउंड कि जो ये फेक इनवॉइसिंग के रैकेट था उसमें जो बेनिफिट मिला वो उसको पास ऑन हुआ या उसमें उसका मालिक का कोई शेयर था. सो इफ दैट कैन बी एस्टैब्लिश्ड देन penal proceedings as well as prosecution proceedings can be initiated against those persons. Now that provisional attachment powers are also extended by allowing the department to even attach property of such persons. So it's a logical conclusion, you can say. कि पेनल्टी उन पे कर सकते हो, प्रोसिक्यूशन उन पे कर सकते हो, तो किसी ने सोचा होगा वहां बैठ के दिल्ली में कि अब प्रोविजनल अटैचमेंट बाकी रहा, वही बाकी रहा है, उसमें भी कर लो. So that is the amendment that even such person's property can be provisionally attached. अब इसमें इश्यू क्या है? इश्यू ये है कि लैंग्वेज इतनी वेग है. एक तरफ कहते हैं प्रोसीडिंग्स इनिशिएट किए होने चाहिए क्वा द रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन. अब ये जो सेकंड पर्सन है, सो टू से, जो हमारे केस में जो ड्राइवर का मालिक है, उसके सामने प्रोसीडिंग्स अभी तक इनिशिएट नहीं हुए बिकॉज उसको अभी तक मान लीजिए शोकोज नहीं मिला imposing penalty under 122(1)(a) or launching prosecution under 132(1)(a). So the question is that by whether launching proceeding against the driver is sufficient to undertake provisional attachment of the property of the owner is the question. Now the way the language is, section 83 is, it merely says that once proceedings are launched against the driver, even the property of the beneficiary is yet to be established, whether it's a beneficiary or not, because that will be only established once department issues a notice under 122, under 74, imposing 122 or 132, launches prosecution under 132, and after culmination of those proceedings, it will be established whether it was a beneficiary or not under 120. So the correct manner should have been to actually first establish whether 122 applies here, 1A, and then if it applies, then provisional attachment could have been done. But merely on suspicion, it is now possible for the department to provisionally attach even property of second person who is not registered person, merely on a suspicion that that person could be beneficiary of this racket, and therefore the property of that person is also liable to be provisionally attached. So again, the reach is expanded like anything. Last issue is on the aspect of commissioner. The law says only commissioner can direct the attachment. Now that aspect has been settled now. Supreme Court has settled in Radhakrishnan Industries that commissioner has a power to delegate his authority to a junior officer. So even a joint commissioner directing the provisional attachment is a valid exercise of that power. So that issue, earlier there was an issue that whether only commissioner's order is required, and because the definition of commissioner only covers the principal commissioner, and the commissioner, that is the chief commissioner of the jurisdiction, it does not extend to joint commissioners, additional commissioners, or all of such other officers. But 5.3 allows the commissioner to delegate that to his junior. So Supreme Court reconciled that and said that even an exercise of this power, it's a draconian power. So even an exercise of that by a junior officer under a valid delegation is a valid exercise of that power. But however, this judgment is not relevant from that perspective. That is fine. There is no issue on that. But this judgment is relevant because this judgment has laid down some very important conditions that are to be met. That remains as it is, because the key amendment, key language in this section 83 has not been changed, and that is this can be resorted to only for the purpose of protecting the interest of government. Now that phrase, purpose of protecting the interest, now whether that can apply merely on suspicion, merely on doubt, the answer is clear no. Department needs a very cogent evidence. Department needs reasons to be recorded in their file. Department needs the reasons to be communicated to that person whose property is sought to be attached. The department needs to hear that person, what he has to say on that proposed provisional attachment. And after considering the objections and by passing a reasoned order saying that despite these objections, these are the evidences that department has to say that to protect the interest of revenue, this is required. An important test that Supreme Court has given in this judgment is this, that whether a situation is such that if the department waits till the adjudication to complete and then to recovery to start, whether department will be at a loss. If the answer to this question is yes, in that particular facts, only in that situation, department can say that we are taking this preemptive step to protect our interest. So Supreme Court has given one classic guidelines in this judgment that remains the same. So in the end, I would say on this particular issue is that despite the increasing the ambit, despite allowing the attachment on mere initiation of proceedings, still these principles remain as it is, and therefore in situation where you find that merely on suspicion the attachments are done, then certainly you can challenge those cases. Again, it's not an appealable order. The provisional attachment order is not an appealable order. So only remedy would be Article 226, where you will have to approach the High Court for getting the relief. Now, detention, search and seizure, the provisions have been recasted in a way that now Section 129(1) says that earlier there was a requirement that when the goods or conveyance, when there is a during the transit or transport or storage during the transportation of goods in that conveyance, if it is found that there is a contravention of the provisions of the Act, then the officer gets the right to detain. And once detained, the officer has the right to release that goods and conveyance only if the concerned owner of those goods or conveyance or even a third person who, when the owner does not come forward. In that situation, unless those persons pay the stipulated amounts. So earlier there was a requirement to pay tax plus penalty where the owner comes forward, or it was based on the amount of goods involved where the owner does not come forward. Now that provisions have been changed, now what the law says, the owner has to pay penalty equal to 200% of tax. So instead of the owner paying tax plus penalty, now that amount remains the same of 200, but instead of 100 tax and penalty, now it becomes 200 penalty altogether. So that is a change. Other than that, all remains the same as far as subsection 1 is concerned, in a sense that even the third option of allowing the furnishing of security equivalent to the amount that is to be paid under clause A or B, that continues, that option continues as it is. 129(2) has been omitted. Now it was basically not required at all, because this actually says that when the goods are detained, then the provisions related to the seizure of those goods under 67(6) would apply. Now, detention and seizure are totally independent acts. Detention and release under subsection 1 has nothing to do with seizure and eventual confiscation of goods. That is a separate proceeding all by itself. So, in a way, this was never required under 129. So that wisdom has prevailed. And now that subsection 2 stands omitted, because that has no role to play as far as 129 is concerned. 129(3), in a situation where it deals with the procedural aspect, that where the goods are detained, then a notice has to be issued within 7 days, specifying what is the penalty which is payable, and then he has to pass an order within 7 days from the service of notice. So in a way, 14 days outer time limit is given to the department, that within 7 days he has to issue a notice, and 7 days from the date of service of that notice, he has to pass an order. 129(4) is basically part of natural justice, that no order can be passed without giving the opportunity. Now, you are all aware, this opportunity is just cosmetic, because driver is not in a position to really submit anything, and in no way an authorized representative can reach that spot and really make any submissions. So this is something which is just a formality, where they issue the notice, they wait for 1 hour, and they issue the order, and they say that hearing has happened. So that is practically how it often happens. 129(6) basically says that if there is a failure in making that payment which is ordered under subsection 3, then in that case, the goods, whatever that they have been detained, they will be seized, and then they will be sold or disposed of as per the provisions of law. So seizure comes at this stage, when the detained goods are not released under an option given under subsection 1, then those goods and conveyance become liable for seizure. And once seized, then the department gets the right to sell those goods or conveyance by way of a process. There is a rule formulated as to how the auction has to happen, and how the money received from the sale are to be appropriated towards the outstanding demand. So that is how this section completes. Now,
just a gentle reminder. I mean,
10 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you.
10 minutes. Now, 131. Now there is a small change. Instead of the notwithstanding clause, now it says where a person violates these 5 situations, in that situation, those goods or conveyance can be also liable for detention. 132 deals with the option to seek release of goods which have been confiscated. In that case, there is a concept of paying confiscation fine. The fine amount will be determined by the officer, but the minimum fine amount would be now equal to 200% of would be equal to the 100% of the tax amount. So that is the change. And 133 again, it was not required in law, because confiscation proceedings and proceedings to recover the tax qua that particular supply are totally independent. So those provisions, if the officer feels that there is a tax to be recovered in respect of those confiscated goods, then anyway he had to go to 74 and he had to issue a notice for recovering that tax. So that was anyway the position. However, 133 used to say that even if someone pays confiscation fine, he is still liable to pay tax, interest, penalty. But that anyway was the case even before. So 74 already takes care of that situation. So 133 now stands omitted. Now, as far as appeals are concerned, in case of orders which are passed under subsection 3 of 129, that is the e-way bill infraction matters, normal 10% you have to deposit. What now the amendment says, you have to deposit 25% in such case. Now that is again something which is again very bookish. because you are aware without paying 200%, your goods will not be released under 129(1). So this essentially is applicable only if, let us say, you opt for furnishing security. If you opt for furnishing security under 129(1)(c) for getting the release of those goods, and thereafter you want to go into an appeal, in that situation, the security furnished is not a pre-deposit. In that situation, you will have to pay 25% of the penalty amount as a pre-deposit instead of a normal yardstick of 10%. However, the second stage pre-deposit 20% has not been amended. So that remains as it is. So at first stage 25%, at second stage 20%. So effectively 45% of the penalty amount would be the pre-deposit that you will have to end up if your case reaches the tribunal, which is yet to be constituted. Rule has been formulated as to the mechanism as to how this entire proceeding, what we discussed, 7-day notice, 7-day order, and after 15 days, if no payment is made, then the goods will be seized along with conveyance and the process of auctioning will start. Now, in that background, number of issues are there. First issue is 129 and 130 are now independent. Earlier, 129(6) used to say that if within 15 days, if that person does not pay, then 130 will be launched. Now, 130 anyway can be launched only if 5 conditions stipulated under 130 subsection 1 are fulfilled, which is totally independent, which requires the evasion of tax to be established. Only in that situation, 130 can be invoked. 129 can be invoked for any contravention of that. 130 can be invoked only in 5 situations which are given under 130 subsection 1. So both were anyway independent. When Gujarat High Court in case of Synergy Fertichem upheld this view. However, 129(6) used to say that if within 15 days of detention, if the tax and penalty is not paid, which was earlier 100, if that is not paid, then 130 can be invoked even in that situation. That was not warranted. So now that stands removed. Now both are independent. 129 will operate in their ambit for contravention. 130 will operate vis-a-vis confiscation only in those 5 specific situations if that particular transaction gets covered in that situation. Now, this is very interesting, whether the right of appeal will survive. Why I am saying that? Because 129(5) says, once you make the payment under 129(1), that is 200% of penalty, where the owner will come forward. In that situation, the order will be, it will be deemed that proceedings are concluded under 129. And 142(3), sub-rule 3 says, in that situation, order will not be issued by the officer. He will issue DRC 05 intimating the conclusion of the proceedings. Now you imagine the situation where, let us say, right now your goods are detained. You have to make payment of 200% of penalty, otherwise goods will not be released. So you make the payment, you submit the details. The officer thinks it is a voluntary payment. So officer does not pass an order under 129(3). What the officer does, he issues you DRC 5 saying that I accept your voluntary payment, and under the amended rule 142(3), now since proceedings are closed because you paid what was required to be paid, qua that particular infraction that happened, now nothing remains. So no order will be passed. Now in that situation, how you will appeal? Because to appeal, you need an order. So in that situation, since the modality right now, as on date, does not have that option of intimating through the portal to that officer while paying DRC 03, that this I am paying it under protest. This is actually not a voluntary payment envisaged under 129(5), so as to conclude the proceeding. This is the payment to just seek release of the goods. That kind of letter should be there, and you should ask for a speaking order, because unless you don't ask for a speaking order, it may happen that mechanically the officer will issue DRC 05 and conclude the proceeding, assuming that you have paid and things are over. In that case, that right to appeal will not be available to you. So this is one aspect that should be kept in mind. Now 74 can be issued. Certainly 74 can be issued. Let us say if goods are without invoice, if it is ultimately found, and proceedings under 129 and 130 are launched, because here, since they are without invoice, 130 also will be launched. It's a clear case of transporting goods with an intent to evade. In that situation, how tax will be recovered now? Tax cannot be recovered under 129 and 130, as we saw earlier. Now that entire concept of recovery of tax on the spot has been done away with. Only penalty will be recovered. And in 130, confiscation fine is to be paid. Then you will get your goods or conveyance back. For tax, officer will have to again go back to 74. Now, which officer can go back to 74? Whether the officer who detained the vehicle, whether he can go back to 74, or he has to share the details to your jurisdictional officer, who will then go back to 74 and issue a show cause notice to recover the tax, qua those goods which were unaccounted, which were without invoice. Now, that issue remains. In my opinion, 74 cannot be invoked by that officer who detained the goods. His limited power of given by law was to detain under 129 and to initiate proceedings under 129 and or 130 as deemed fit. He does not have the power to issue a show cause notice under 74. And therefore, my view would be that for 74, it is the jurisdictional officer who will have to. Till now, it was never a problem because they used to recover tax also on the spot. So no longer additional tax recovery was pending, so as to go back to 74 and demand the tax from that particular person. But now, since tax remains unpaid as far as the government is concerned, they will have to go back to 74, and which officer can go back to 74, that modality is yet to be clarified as to how that 74 proceedings will be launched. Now, let us say under 74, the government is very smart. When this came, they are realized that now since 74 will also have to be initiated. Now, under 74, there is an option that if you pay the payment of tax and 15% penalty, all proceedings get over. So someone might say that now he let us say take a case where goods are detained. I'll take just 2 minutes to explain this. This is very interesting and something that has to be understood well. Goods are moving without invoice, detained, 129 triggered, 200% sought, paid, 129 over. 130 also triggered because this was a case covered under 130 subsection 1. Clearly, transportation was with an intent to evade the tax. 130 triggered, confiscation fine. Officer has a discretion. Law only gives a lower cap and an upper cap. Lower cap is 100% of tax as penalty, as fine. Upper cap is value of goods less tax payable on those goods. So that is the upper cap. Between these two cap, officer can say whatever confiscation fine he thinks proper to be paid by you for release. Let us say he determines some amount, you pay that amount, 130 also over. You get back your goods and conveyance. Now your jurisdictional officer launches 74 and says that what about tax on that transaction, because it was clearly a case of evasion. So under 74, and he also launches 122 saying that this was basically a case of evasion. So tax, whatever interest, if at all, and penalty under 122 is what he wants to demand. Now you are clearly admitting the fact it was evasion. There is no, you are not going to dispute on that part in such situation. So you say, fine, I will deposit the tax. I will deposit 15% of penalty under 122. That option is available under 74(5), where even prior to show cause notice, you may say that moment you realize this, you know 74 love letter is going to come sometime later. So before it comes, you voluntarily go under 74(5) and say that, look, take my tax, take my 15% penalty, and now don't initiate any proceeding under 74 for tax and 100% penalty under 122 separate. So by doing that, I save at least 85% of the penalty under 122. I hope everyone is with me on what I am saying. Now in that situation, what the person would have argued, he would have argued that, look, your explanation to 74 says that if I pay no tax under 74(5), all proceedings under the law are concluded against me. So he will say that now since all proceedings are concluded, now even proceedings of 129 and 130 are deemed to have been concluded. So whatever I paid was in the nature of deposit. You refund me that amount back to me. Because now under 74, I have concluded what I was supposed to conclude. If let us say this transportation would not have been there, if at my premises itself unaccounted goods would have been found, then what you would have done? Only 74 and 122. Because of transportation involved, 129 and 130 also got involved. So in that situation, you would have said that, look, since 74 is there, now don't demand anything under 129 and 130. Whatever paid was deposit, you return me back. To avoid that situation, explanation 1 to 74 has been amended now to say that the deemed conclusion will not extend to 129 and 130. So you cannot demand that 129 and 130 back, amount that you paid under 130 back, on the ground that under 74(5) you have ask for a deemed conclusion of proceedings by paying tax before getting the notice along with 15% penalty. So law whoever drafted this has that wisdom to know that now 74 interplay will start with 129. To avoid that consequence of people coming back to 129 or 130 and getting that refund back, he made that amendment in 74. But from a perspective of jurisdiction, the issue still remains to be sorted out as to which officer will have what jurisdiction when such situation will happen. So that is only something that only time will tell how this will work out. In fact, that officer missed one point. What point he missed? 74(5) clause I, which says any tax paid under 129 and 130 will not be allowed as an input tax credit. Now, what is the relevance of 129? Now, under 129, anyway, no tax is getting collected. Now, what is getting collected under 129 and 130 is all penalties or fine. There is no tax collection under 129 and 130 for them to say that under 129 and 130, if you have paid any tax, ITC of that will not be available to the recipient. Now, whatever I pay tax, that will be under 74 only. So that consequent amendment has not been done in 17(5)(I), which otherwise should have been considered when they want to amend, when they actually amended 129 and 130. Now, transporter. Now, this is very interesting. Now, transporter, can he receive? अब कई बार होता क्या है, वो जो माल जो गुड्स का ओनर है वो कहता है मुझे पड़ी नहीं है, 2 लाख का गुड्स है, छोड़ो ये सब मैं भरूंगा, 129 भरूंगा, 130 भरूंगा, फिर 74 भरूंगा, फिर 122 भरूंगा, तो एक्चुअली मैं तो 2 लाख से ज्यादा भर के अल्टीमेटली बाहर निकलूंगा, तो छोड़ो मैं गुड्स छोड़ देता हूं, उनको जो बेचना है बेचे, जो करना है करे, मेरे पास ना प्रॉपर्टी है ना कुछ है, 74 का ऑर्डर भी देंगे, रिकवरी क्या करेंगे? अब वो ट्रांसपोर्टर बेचारा कहेगा पर आपका 2 लाख का गुड्स है, मेरी तो 20 लाख की ट्रक पकड़ी हुई है, अब मेरी 20 लाख की ट्रक भी नहीं छूटेगी आपके ये 2 लाख के चक्कर में। अब उनके लिए प्रैक्टिकल डिफिकल्टी थी, वो ट्रक छोड़ा नहीं सकते थे सेपरेटली, कोई मौका नहीं था। अब ये मौका मिला है 129(6) में, जब ये अमेंडमेंट आया तब उसके बाद अब उनको कहा गया है कि यदि आप टैक्स भर देते हो, जो उसको भरना था, जो ओनर है उसको, उसका टैक्स भर देते हो आप ये पर्टिकुलर गुड्स पे जो लगा है, या 1 लाख रुपए, विच एवर इज लोअर, इतना पैसा भर देते हो तो आपकी कन्वीनियंस हम छोड़ देंगे। बट ये ऑप्शन 129 का, 130 में ऑप्शन नहीं है। सो 130 भी ट्रिगर होगा, बिकॉज जब कन्वीनियंस इस तरह से जो अपना केस है जहां इनवॉइस ही नहीं था, तो वहां 129 के साथ 130 भी ट्रिगर होगा, तो 130 में उसके पास पैरेलल ऑप्शन नहीं है इस तरह से एक टोकन अमाउंट या एक फिक्स अमाउंट पे करके उसकी कन्वीनियंस को रिलीज करवाना। सो दैट इज अगेन स्टिल अ प्रैक्टिकल इश्यू फॉर अ ट्रांसपोर्टर who may be an abater, so to say, of this transaction. Now, last question on 129, can it be issued on every infraction? See, 129 or 130 में एक बात तो साफ है, 130 can be issued only on specific infractions where there is a clear intent to evade. Does it mean 129 is automatic for every contravention? Still the answer is no. We have n number of judgments which have come from high courts saying that 129(1), although it uses the language contravention of the provisions of the Act, that does not mean every contravention makes those goods liable for detention under 129. You have to see the reality. Recently in Supreme Court, what happened? When the amount on that particular officer was enhanced from 10,000 to 69,000. What happened? There, because of the lockdown, the transportation could not happen within the time limit given under that particular e-way bill. That fact was not disputed by the officer. But still he took a view that 129 is applicable and he demanded the payment under 129(1) for releasing those goods and conveyance. That was challenged. Now, Supreme Court came very heavily on that officer that when you are not disputing the reasons for this infraction, then you cannot trigger 129 to say that still payment under 129 was mandated. So that gives a ratio that 129(1) is not automatic for every infraction. One needs to see the reasons. And that is also clear from the fact that opportunity of hearing is given. Otherwise, what is the need of opportunity of hearing? For every mistake, if you see 129 is there, then hearing becomes meaningless. Now, the last topic, only 2 minutes. I will not take much time. Supreme Court extension. I will not refer to hierarchy. What happened? In a nutshell, as on date, what the position is, that the entire period from 15th March 2020 till 28th of February of 2022, that entire period has to be excluded for calculating the limitation that has been prescribed under the general law or any special law in respect of judicial proceedings and or quasi-judicial proceedings. Further, Supreme Court says that on 20th February, what will happen? If the balance period of limitation is available to you, let us say you received some order on 10th of March of 2020. Now, normal time limit is 3 months for you to file the appeal. 5 days you used there. You did not file the appeal. Now 15th March came. Supreme Court says from 15th March, stop the clock of 3 months. Start the clock only when? From 20th February 22. Till that clock will stop. Now you start the clock and you find that I have more than 90 days or I have less than 90 days to complete the filing of that appeal. In that case, Supreme Court says you will get 90 days. Are you getting the point? Out of 90 days, 5 days I utilized earlier. So now I am left with 85 days when I start the clock on 1st of March of 22. But since Supreme Court says that either that time, what is left to you, or 90 days, whichever is higher is what you will get. So since I have now 85 days technically to file that appeal, but since 90 days is higher than 85 days, I will get extended 5 more days to file that appeal. But if the time limit is over, let us say within this period, if let us say 50 days have gone, I have only balance period of 40 days, then 90 days will still apply. So in a sense, what I'm trying to say is, enter this period from 15th March 22 first to 20th February 22 has to be first culled out from the total period of limitation available to you. From that, you have to see what is the leftover days as on 1st of March of 22. You have to compare that with the figure of 90. Now in GST law, generally 90 is the outer limit. We don't have, only for department, they get that 6-month time limit to file the appeals. Taxpayer do not get that 6 months time limit. So from department end, cases would come where their unexpired period could be beyond 90 days. For the taxpayer, generally, it will all be within 90 days. So you get that 90-day extra time from 1st of March to file the appeal. So that is how this order has to be looked at. In fact, it also clarifies that even in case of launching of proceedings under the Arbitration Act, even in that, which are technically not judicial or quasi-judicial, so to say, because it's an arbitration, you are settling a dispute. You're not creating a dispute or going before a court or a quasi-judicial authority to settle a dispute. Even in that situation, they say that this benefit will apply. So in GST, we have a very limited point, whether it applies to refund. Now, already that basically we have 2 decisions. One is of Madras High Court in GNC Infra, another is recently Bombay High Court in Sahir Supply, where they have said that this will apply. In fact, the circular itself, 157, issued by the board is quite confusing. On one side, they agree that refund proceedings are quasi-judicial. On other side, they say that this extension applies only to appeal proceedings. Now, that is self-contradictory. Circular never says it does not apply to refund. It in fact recognizes refund as a quasi-judicial, but does not expressly say that this applies to refund filing of the refund claims. But anyway, 2 high courts have said it clearly applies. They have not struck down the circular. Please understand, both the high courts have followed the circular. In fact, both the high courts have said we are following the circular and saying that circular itself considers this as quasi-judicial. So refund filed after this thing is also within the time limit. Only last issue that has been kept open by the Supreme Court in the case of Sahir is the validity of this Rule 90 sub Rule 3. Because in that case, what happened? Original application was filed, deficiency memo was issued, second file, second deficiency memo, third file. When third was filed, COVID was there. COVID period came into picture. And then the third was eventually filed belatedly after this period of 2 years. Supreme Court says, Bombay High Court says that since that issue already stands covered, that the entire period has to be excluded, this application has to be entertained. But the question of whether the filing of the fresh claim, so to say, after receiving deficiency memo, is it actually a fresh application or is it a continuation of the first application? That issue, Bombay High Court says, will consider it in an appropriate case. Clearly, they have said in this judgment that that issue we are keeping open. In an appropriate case, we'll deal with that aspect also as to whether filing refund after getting the deficiency memo, is it resulting into a new claim or is it just a continuation of the original claim? this is relevant for the purpose of for dual purpose. One is time limitation, another is department's obligation to pay interest. Because if the first date is considered as a date of filing, then the interest obligation of the department will start based on that date and not the date of filing of the claim after whatever curing, after getting the deficiency memo and curing the defect. So I think that is all. I think I have exceeded the time, but since the topic was like that, so I am very grateful to the association, to all the participants, to special thanks to Shubhamji, Tarunji for being kind enough inviting me. If anyone has any questions, you may let me know. I am right now available only.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we all wanted you to continue so much because there have been so many insights which we all, once we started hearing you, got indulged into it. It was so difficult for us to get out of it because of the amount of knowledge that we were getting with every topic, every subtopic rather that you had been discussing on the topics which had been given to you. Sir, I think Venu sir had one issue which he has raised. So I think that is again in the chat box. So which is again a very interesting aspect, which I think all of us are still feeling that it's an open issue, but we like to hear you on that also. Venu sir, if you're there right now, you can also join in. Basically, sir is saying that the time limit is provided for 90 days for filing of appeal. And within 15 days, if I'm not making the payment of penalty for 129, the goods are to be auctioned off. And how come is there a time limit of 15 days? I mean, it's not possible to file an appeal within 15 days. Even if we file an appeal within this time period, do you think they'll release the goods because we have filed the appeal and we have paid the pre-deposit? You think the goods should be released because of that? Venu sir, please let me know if I have completed your question, sir.
No, yeah. So you have given the question. Somewhere I feel with the change in 129 and the MOV 7, which they are now wanting to make it, I feel kind of somewhere this is contradictory. The 15 दिन के अंदर appeal file करना है and 15, which is practically not possible because it is the appeal work is done by the lawyers or the CS, it's not the client. So they have to get the briefing and everything. So and as Abhay rightly said, the basis of filing appeal, I am if they are issuing a DRC 05, thinking that okay, I am agreeing with the order. So somewhere this process is the CBIC has to clarify, and Abhay gives a scary statement that okay, the whatever you are paying, you have already paid and agreed. The pre-deposit के लिए अलग से extra security if I gave a BG or bank deposit and they have utilized that or withdrawn that encashed it, so I'll have to pay separate penalty. Now I think this is proceeding something which we will when ourselves are a little confused, officer will always take whatever is the best interest. I think CBIC has to give some clarity. Somewhere I am lost here. That 107 gives me 90 days. Where is that free time of 90 days? That is something which is 129 15 days is curtailing is what I may view.
Absolutely. And sir, sorry, I just like to add one small thing. And even if you're paying 25% penalty there, in that case, if the bank guarantee is also there, that money is blocked. Plus we have the 25% penalty that we are supposed to pay now and thereafter file the appeal. So now it is becoming a 125% burden, which is there, and there is no confirmed demand because the matter is still under appeals.
Not 125%. The penalty was 200%.
Yeah, so penalty was 200%, right? Absolutely. Adding to that is 200% now, right?
Yeah.
Right. So see, basically here, see, the way I look at it is like this, that once I get a notice, once the goods are detained, I get a notice under 129 saying that this is the 200% amount that I have to pay. The law actually gives me an option under 120. In fact, law gives me 3 options. Under 129(1), it gives me 2 sub options saying that either I pay that amount or give a security. I get the release of the goods. The officer passes an order. If I want to challenge that order, I can go into 107 and deposit whatever pre-deposit. If I have paid entire amount, then there is no pre-deposit to be made. Only refund to be claimed on the outcome, final favorable outcome of that appeal. If I've given a security deposit, then certainly, if that has been encashed, then certainly it's a deposit then. If it has not been encashed, then only I will have to pay under 107, 25%. Now the entire remedy of 107 is what we are discussing. That the remedy is basically there in law, but practically how do you exercise that remedy is the issue, because 30 days, 90 days time limit and so on and so forth. So here in one of the case, I can give you an example. What we did immediately when the goods were detained and we realized this was an issue. The stay provisions operate qua the payment of pre-deposit. It does not operate qua the filing of the appeal. Number one. So if you can pay the pre-deposit under 107, stay gets automatically triggered. You don't have to file an appeal to get a stay, so to say. So once you pay that, then we wrote a letter to that concerned officer who detained the goods saying that this is the demand. This is the pre-deposit that we have already paid. Under this provision, now no further recovery is possible. So on that basis, you release the goods. Now, here the technical point. What point? He was also a smart officer. So here the technical point saying that 129 is separate provision for release of the detained goods. So for release of the detained goods, 129(1) obligations have to be met. The remedy of appeal is a post facto remedy. It is not a remedy that you can exercise during the period of detention of those goods. So that was his view. Certainly that view will be up for debate as time progresses, but that view might have some merit to say that detention and the law giving the power to immediately seek a spot recovery is to prevent further fraud or to prevent further revenue leakage. So it is with that wisdom that 129 gets formulated saying that 200% pay upfront, then only you take your goods back. Appeal remedy is where you are of the view that no, your case has merits. There was an error somewhere in e-way bill, whatever is the case. And now you want that penalty back from the government. So probably for that reason, probably government is also not coming upfront and clarifying that if you make the pre-deposit, you can release the goods, because 129 does not have, although demand is stayed, but which demand is stayed is the issue under 107. Whether 129 demand is stayed, because 129 has two aspects. One is releasing the goods some payment, and then there is an order under 129(3), which is an appealable order. So probably right now we have to live with the fact that unless you don't pay or give the deposit, goods will not be released.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. I think I don't think so this session could have been more enriching on the three topics that you were covering today. I think we have all been very patient listeners, and we have all tried to gather each and every word that you were saying so that we don't lose out on anything, because there was so much of insights that you were giving on every subtopic. So thank you so much once again for a very wonderful lecture that you have given us, sir. And I'm also presenting you the e-memento from the side of the association.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sparing your valuable time and sharing your insights. Thank you so much to everyone, and special thank you to Venu sir, who has also joined us and shared his views on the topic. I am sure we'll also have Venu sir in the near future. He's always been one of the pillars once again for the GST and Indirect Taxes Committee of ACAE also. So thank you so much, Venu sir, and thank you so much, Abhay sir, for having discussed this topic in so much of depth. We all have been thoroughly enriched, and we always look forward to your support even in the future, because we need these kind of insights for our audience who have joined in large numbers. So I think we had a very large group of audience who had stayed right till the end. So I must compliment them, because it's very rare that we have had such a like an session where people have stayed right till the end to understand whatever is being discussed. So even now we are having 73 people there. So outright, I can say that there were around 140, 150 people who had been there throughout the session. So which is I think speaks volumes of what the topic and how you have discussed this topic, sir. So it is because of your insights that everyone has been able to stay glued to the screen, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
And thank you so much to everyone for giving us a very patient hearing. And we will keep wanting your support for all the participants for all the future seminars of ACAE as well. Thank you so much.
Finally, I would also say thank you to Mr. Abhay Desai. Thank you so much for such an engrossing session. Thank you so much.